All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to call this meeting to order. This is the April 10th Howell Township Council's workshop meeting. Let the record reflect it's just a little after 6:30. Ms. Woolman, would you please read the opening statement?
Let the minutes reflect that adequate notice of the holding of this workshop meeting of the Howell Township Council was provided for in the following manner. By the posting of a copy of said notice upon the bulletin board in the Township Municipal Building on January 1, 2007. By the faxing of a copy of said notice to the Asbury Park Press, Tri-Town News, and Star Ledger for publication on January 1, 2007. By the filing of a copy of said form of notice in the Township Clerk's office on January 1, 2007. The public will be allowed to attend and will be allowed to participate pursuant to the Open Public Meetings Law. The public is reminded that civility and decorum will be maintained during the meeting. Any contracts awarded at this meeting or between now and the next meeting will be required to comply with the requirements of Public Law 1975, Chapter 127. In accordance with the Fire Prevention Code, be advised that this facility is designed with 3 emergency exits for your safety. The locations are as follows. Upon exiting the meeting room to the rear, they are to your immediate left and immediate right, and at the front of the meeting room at the left of the dais. Furthermore, smoking is not permitted in the municipal building. Please take note that this meeting is being videotaped for possible future broadcast on Howell Township TV 77. Roll call. Mrs. Dalton? Here. Mr. Howell?
Here.
Mrs. Showmaker?
She'll be here momentarily. She called me a few minutes ago.
Mr. Walsh?
Here.
Mayor DeBella?
Here. Okay, I believe we do have reason to go into executive session. Is that right, Mr. Chansky?
Mayor, for contract negotiations and personnel matters.
Okay. Ms. Woolman, would you please read the necessary statement?
And litigation.
And litigation. Okay.
Whereas Title 10, Chapter 4, Section 13 of the New Jersey Revised Statutes require that the public shall not be excluded from any meeting of a public body unless a resolution authorizing such exclusion is adopted at a public meeting. Whereas the Township Council of the Township of Howell has determined that such a closed meeting is required to discuss certain matters which are exempted from consideration with the public in attendance under New Jersey Revised Statutes 10:4-12. Now therefore be it resolved by the Township Council of the Township of Howell that the public shall be excluded from the next portion of this meeting, and that the Township Council will reconvene in public session thereafter. Be it further resolved that minutes will be kept of the meeting in closed session, and the time and the circumstances under which the discussion conducted in closed session can be disclosed to the public cannot be determined at this time.
Okay, we need a motion and a second, please.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any remarks? Hearing none. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mayor DeBella?
Yes. Okay, we expect to be out within what time, Mr. Chansky, did we say?
7:30.
By about 7:30, we'll come back into public. Thank you. Okay, good evening again, ladies and gentlemen. We just want to call the meeting back to order. If you wouldn't mind, if folks on either end wouldn't mind just shutting the doors in the back, we'd appreciate it. We have already had our opening statement. Council has been in executive session. We apologize for the delay. I'd ask that everyone please rise for a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd ask that we all just please remain standing for a moment of silent observation, thinking of the troops defending this country all over the world. Thank you. We do have a presentation tonight. Before we get started, I'd ask that the council please join me in the front.
Mayor, the hand mic's up there. You just have to turn it on.
Is it up there?
Yeah, just have to turn it on.
He just went number 2.
Just for you.
Yeah, just
Hit it. No, it is. Look at that.
Don't shake it like that, you're gonna get Chico.
I could say a lot of things right now, but I won't.
I was thinking it too.
Were you thinking the same thing?
Stand down.
Well, good evening, folks. One of the things that really is the nicest part of the job as elected officials that we have is to recognize people from our community who have done extraordinary things. And we've really made it a mission the last several years to attempt to go out of our way to do that. And tonight certainly is no exception. Council and I read an article in the paper earlier in the year about a resident who walked almost 50 miles from Belmar to the Capitol in Trenton in support of the troops. And when we all saw the article, it was unanimous that we wanted to recognize this person, not only for the distinction and the honor that they brought our community, but just because of the pure compassion and the humanity of what they had accomplished, and its importance as a nation that we stand behind the men and women who defend this country. And so we're really delighted to have with us tonight a veteran of Iraq, a Howell resident who served on behalf of our country and served in Iraq in 2005. Craig Briner, I got it right?
Yes, you did, sir.
And his son, what's your son's name?
Christian.
And Christian. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Briner to tell you about his story and his mission and how special it is. But we wanted to recognize you publicly here tonight because your service has clearly brought distinction to this community. And the people of the community are really grateful for that. Many people spoke about your inspirational story. And so I'm pleased to present on behalf of the entire council and myself a certificate of appreciation. It reads, to Craig Briner, on behalf of the Township Council and myself, we wish to extend our sincere congratulations for the completion of your walk from Belmar to Trenton in support of our troops. Your passion and determination and goodwill towards men is to be commended. That's the seal of the Township of Howell, and it's presented this 10th day of April 2007. And once again, great work. Thank you. Thank you. Would you like to say a few words?
Thank you. First off, I'd like to thank the town committee. Thank you. Real important thing that I wanted to get across to people is there's a lot of good things going on in Iraq. Our troops there are doing a great job, and all over the world. It wasn't just for the guys and women that are serving our country now, but it was for all the vets, because every vet did a great job, and that's what I was doing it for. Everybody heard what a gentleman said about our vets and our guys now, about their educations, and that's what ticked it off. And I tried it once, and I didn't go to the media or anybody, and I didn't make it. And second time I tried it, I went to the media because I talked to the men and women that were in Iraq and Afghanistan, and the morale of the troops was horrible. And I said, well, what can I do? I said, I tried it once, this time I'm going to make it. And I went to the media, and the best thing that I got was letters from the guys and women in Iraq and Afghanistan saying that it brought the morale of their fellow troops up when they heard about what I was doing, and that other people are starting to do things. And we're going to continue doing it. People from Howell joined me, people from Jackson, all throughout the state. I had over 100 people join me throughout the day. And they all asked if I was going to do it again, and I said, we're definitely going to do it again. We're going to keep doing it until every troop comes home, and that everybody knows that there is good going on in Afghanistan and in Iraq.
Thank you very much. Thanks again. No, please. You don't like to go with me.
I help them out.
Walk with the council members and talk about issues. Two at a time. We could have a competition and see.
Okay. Call the council's attention to our agenda. We do have some items that I believe are add-ons, and I believe there's things we need to take action on this evening. Is that right, Mr. Chinyesky?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I'm going to open up the meeting to the public for anyone who'd like to make a comment or has a question on any of the items that we may be taking action on this evening. And we do have, in addition to the add-ons, I'm just going to go through the agenda and point out those things we're going to take action on. We're going to take action on 9B25, and we're going to take action on 9B26. We're also going to take action on all of the 9C items. I'm going to go off that one as well, because these are the add-ons, aren't they? Yeah, I just went on the ones that were on the regular agenda. Now, off of the add-ons, which we need to motion to add on to the agenda, we have 8A4, which is a carry of a public hearing of ordinance 00713, which was the PMU Plan Mixed Use Ordinance. 9A1, we're going to take action, obviously, on an ordinance introduction. That's 9A1 and 9A2. We'll have a hearing on those accordingly. With respect to the 9Bs, 21, 24, 25, 26, and 31. Ms. Woolman, are those in the agenda everyone in the audience has? No. They're not, okay. So let me just read them. 9B21 is a resolution, release of performance guarantees for Cedar, Glen, and Howell. 9B24 is a resolution memorializing action for the certified tree expert for 2007. 9B25 is another add-on, resolution memorializing action of the appraisal service at large for 2007. 9B26 is a resolution authorizing the funding of the Office of Smart Growth Grant Program. 9B31, a resolution, release of performance guarantees, Cedar Glen Sewer. And then we do have 9C items.
And I believe that they're all on the agenda.
And they're on the agenda. So these, all the 9Cs are in the material that the community has.
Mayor, one other resolution that is before the council is the Best Buy resolution. It's for preliminary and final sewer approval.
Okay.
It's not listed on the sheet in front of you, but it is a resolution.
Which item number is that?
We're going to give that item number 9B32, Resolution R07182.
So it's 9B32. Okay. I'll entertain anyone from the public who has a question or comment on any of these matters we're going to take action on tonight. Mrs. Dixell, come on up.
Mayor, what about?
Mrs. Dixell, we need you to come up to the microphone.
What about all the 9Bs, all of them?
Mrs. Dixell, we need you to please come up to the microphone so we get it on the record.
The consent agenda, right? They're not going to vote on those tonight.
Yeah, let me remind the public, this is a workshop meeting. So we're going to talk through many of the items on this evening for our meeting in a week or 2 weeks when we then finalize. There are some things we're going to take action on tonight. Since we are going to take action on them, we're going to afford the public the opportunity to ask questions on them before we act on them. So the items that I mentioned specifically that we will take action on tonight is what we'll entertain questions on now.
Let me ask you another question.
Just
okay?
introduce yourself for the record.
Barbara
Mrs.
Dixell, The Villages, Howell Township. What about, like, the 9B4 and all the way through this 9B15? Are you good, those consent agenda items, aren't they?
They're not. This is a workshop meeting. We don't take action at a workshop meeting on all these items. This is a workshop meeting, not a regular meeting.
So you're not going to vote on these
So we're
tonight?
only going to take action, Mrs. Dixell, on those items. I'll just say them again for the
Okay,
benefit of the
that's fine.
public. It's 9B25,
I want to ask about that.
9B24, I'm sorry, it's 24, 25, 26,
Okay.
all of the 9C items, and then we're also going to take action on a variety of items which are add-ons, which I listed before.
Okay, 9B25.
Okay?
Could you explain that? I thought you already had,
Sure. For the benefit of the public, 9B25 is a resolution memorializing action for appraisal services at large for 2007. Mr. Bongiovanni, you want to take that?
Well, the council voted on that at the last meeting, but we need a written resolution. It's called a memorialization after a township council or a body like the township council, like the zoning board or planning board, makes a resolution without a written record of it. then at the next meeting, you memorialize it. And that's what that one does. And the same thing for the one for the certified tree expert as well.
How does this differ from the services that you had for the appraisal company that did the revals? Because you've got a whole bunch of stuff here. How does this differ from that?
Mr. Bongiovanni, go ahead.
Well, they are going to, there was a bid process done, and several companies replied to it, and rather than choose one of them, the council decided to use them all as a list of service providers, and so when an appraisal is needed for a real property issue, probably, then we would go to that list and choose from one of those
You
companies.
could, okay. All
Anything
right.
else, Mrs. Dixon?
Yeah, the 9B26.
9B26. All right, that is a resolution authorizing the funding for the Office of Smart Growth for a grant program. Mr. Janetzky, would you please respond?
Yes, Mayor, if you recall, you inquired a few months ago about a grant we received for a project that we're no longer doing. And so this application is actually to amend our grant application.
Was that the Nature Center?
Correct.
Okay.
And this grant would be to use those funds to look at green technology to reduce electricity and energy costs at our existing municipal facilities.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Dixon.
Appreciate
Anyone
it.
else who'd like to be heard on just those items we're going to take action on this evening? Mr. Costigan, welcome, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. John Costigan, 214 Birdsall Road. On the Farmers Advisory, I understand you're going to have those two people from,
Which item are you referring to, Mr.?
I'm sorry, I apologize,
That's okay.
Mr. Mayor. 9C1.
9C1? Okay.
Yeah. There's two people, they're a couple, and they would be very good. I know you didn't get a chance to do it the last meetings that you had a chance. So those are the two. And at this stage, we had Sal Massaro. I wasn't sure if he was going to be able to be with us. He's on the Ordinance Review Committee, but he was kind enough that he will be with us. He was at our meeting, and we just adjourned upstairs tonight, and we like him a lot. So we're working on the second one. We have other people that we're discussing amongst ourselves.
So are you making a recommendation to council for the appointing of these two alternates?
Yes, sir, for the Farmers
And
Advisory.
who are the names of these people? Mr. Howell has it?
Mrs., yeah,
I have them back in the office.
yeah,
man.
it's a
But-
Utopia Farm. They're husband and wife, but they both wanted to join. I wanted to get one on mine and one on Farmers Advisory. They really want to be together, so I was happy for that.
Okay.
Emil
And-
and Sharon Hubert.
Hubert,
Right.
yeah, Hubert.
And Mayor, just to clarify, the name that Mr. Costigan did mention, Sal Massaro, would be for 9C2 as
Yes.
one of the alternates on the Preservation Task Force.
Okay, anything else, Mr. Costigan?
That's all, sir. I thank you very much, and thank you
Thank
for your
you.
help on our preservation, all of you. Thank you.
Anyone else who'd like to comment on the actionable items? Yes, sir, Mr. Lariah.
Vince Lariah, 56C, The Villages.
Hello, Mr.
And it's
Lariah.
relative to 9B26. I have an interest in programs which will give us green performance, if you will. And I have to ask, at this point, has this specific application been established?
Mr. Janetzky?
Yeah, it's there for you to sign this evening, I believe.
What were this, for Mr. Lariah's benefit, can you add any more specificity what you mentioned before?
Sure. Our deputy manager is the grants coordinator, so she's done a great job pulling this together, so I'll ask her to
Mrs. Schlegel, would you
summarize
comment?
it.
Yes, this grant will fund a feasibility study on integrating green building principles into the historic buildings. So that's really what it is to take a look at what direction that we can go in to improve on energy efficiency.
At this point, then, there was no specific application.
No, the grant application,
if you will.
right, no, the grant application is actually for the feasibility study on what would work here.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lariah. Anyone else who'd like to comment on an item we're going to take action on tonight? Mr. Magid, you have something for tonight?
Well, I'm going to ask before I come up.
Come on up. Why don't you sit down and you can ask us so we get it on the record, please. Thank you, sir.
A. Baggett, 89 Mariners Cove in Howell.
Hello, Mr. Magid.
Good evening. I just want to know if you're taking action or you're discussing in any way this ordinance 0-07-12.
0-07-12.
12.
Dash 12.
We
17.
we are,
Tonight.
and that's correct. And we will have a separate hearing on that. That's a,
Tonight.
it's an, yes, we are.
Oh, okay. And the same thing applies to 0-07-13? There'll be a separate?
That is correct.
Oh, okay.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Magid. All right, I'm going to close the public portion to comment on items that may be actionable this evening, and we're going to get into reports of township officials. Mr. Chernetsky, you're up, sir. What do you have for us?
Okay, Mayor, a number of items. One is just the council had asked that we carry information about the school budget on Channel 77, and we have been, they've provided us with a voiced-over PowerPoint, and we've been running that pretty consistently for the past week and a half to 2 weeks. With respect to item 8A4 on the agenda, that's the PMU ordinance. We opened that for a public hearing, and residents had requested various amendments, and we are actively pursuing some of those. And we anticipate that possibly the ordinance may be amended, in which case we would send it back to the planning board to review those amendments, and therefore we would but given the nature of the agreement, we would respectfully request that we not rescind it, but that we open the hearing, but then continue it again until the 24th.
Okay.
I'm,
You have a question, Mr. Walsh?
So you want to continue 8A4 to the 24th?
yes, sir.
So when we do that, we'll take action on it later.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I'd like to report to council that within the next 3.5 weeks, we will be going out to bid on the Hoffman irrigation system, Freewood Acres Park, and Phase 2 of the Bonham project. Early at our...
Hold on one second, Mr. Chernetsky. Mr. Walsh.
And for the public's knowledge, and mine, how long does the bidding process usually take when something goes out to bid?
Once we advertise, I think we provide something in the neighborhood of 20 days or so for people to submit applications. I think it may be actually longer. I think it's like 30 days. They submit applications, and then it has to come to council. Council award. Oh well, the attorney reviews the bids, make sure everything that was supposed to be submitted is there and legitimate, and then a recommendation comes to the governing body, and then once the mayor signs it, it's good to go.
So we're looking at a minimum of 60 to 90 days after it's first advertised. Is that correct? That's
Yeah,
okay. Thank you.
sure.
Go ahead, Mr. Chernetsky.
At our reorganization meeting, Councilwoman Showmaker indicated that one of the pressing priorities for her was to have a ordinance in place that would regulate sexually oriented businesses in our community. And I know council as a whole has been pursuing this matter for approximately at least 5 years, as I understand it. And what we have is distributed a draft ordinance for you this evening. It does not represent the full effort that I know council was trying to undertake, meaning actually relocate existing businesses. And that's I think that's a noteworthy objective, and that's one we'll keep pursuing. But I think in the interim, what we ought to do is consider policies and ordinances that close the door for any new businesses. What we're able to piece together is a policy that, one, defines what sexually oriented businesses are. It prohibits that use in areas we know we don't want them, meaning neighborhood commercial areas, the HD1 areas, those places. And then the other things it does is to say that, understand that right now, there's no prohibition anywhere. So we know where we don't want them. So then on top of all this, we're putting in a number of conditions in the event that they do exist, such as you can't be within a school, within such a distance of a school, a residential district, thousands of feet of a similar business. So it puts those regulations in place and it gets us out of the debate of exactly where we ought to put them. Because frankly, I don't think we ought to put, I think council's policy is that we ought not identify a zone at this point. So I think it's a solid first step, and we're going to have the attorney and I discussed it today. He's going to review it in greater detail, and if council is open to that first step concept, then we'd like to be in a position to introduce on the 24th.
You want to entertain any questions or discussions now, Mr. Chiansky?
Mayor, that's your call.
Okay,
But,
yeah, I mean, we're talking about it now. Mrs. Showmaker, this has been something you've been championing for quite a while. What comments would you like to offer?
I think I want to thank you for your diligence on this. I think it's a good first step. And what I like that you did do is, and what I've always thought would be to the benefit of the community, is to put layers of protection, put as many layers on there, and not to restrict an area, not to push it, not to force it, because how do we force that to any one area? You know, how do we put that on any one person or community? But I think if we would put layers of restrictions on it, it protects the area overall. I'm happy to see that we're taking it out of our neighborhood and commercial zones. One question that I want to ask you, and also Mr. Bongiovanni, is that, and I haven't had a chance to really read this, on our existing, like what happens to our existing businesses, that won't restrict us, it won't put it in there like it won't grandfather. For instance, one said business, say it's a business leased to on Route 9. If the lease is not renewed, that doesn't open us up to somebody to come back and say, well, this was in here before. Now our new ordinance, and that's why it's so important to get this on the books, now our new ordinance is in existence, which now they have to abide by the new restrictions, correct?
I think the zoning aspect of it would not change their legal right to continue functioning. Okay. The zoning aspect of it, ruling them out of certain districts, will not effectively eliminate those uses.
You mean the ones that are already there?
Right.
Yeah, no, but if I'm just saying, if their lease is, if it's done.
Right. If they leave.
No, yes, if they leave.
Yes.
Not another business can come in here and say, well, that was there before. Anything new
No,
after that would be that's why we need to get this in place.
If the use was abandoned, then.
Correct.
Then absolutely.
They would have to buy with the new, yeah.
Yes.
We need to get this. This is really the first, we've waited so long. We really need to take a step and then learn as we go along, but we do need to take this first step.
Mrs. Dalton, we'll go back to you. Do you have any questions or comments on this? No. Okay, Mr. Howell.
Mayor, I don't know if you recall, but a couple of years back, I had mentioned to the council that was sitting then that the Township in Bergen County, Palisades Park, had a problem where they were trying there were too many of one type of an establishment open, and they were open 24 hours a day. So what the township did to try to regulate the businesses without getting themselves in trouble was they said that businesses on the main roads in the township had to close at 11 o'clock, with the only exception being if more than 50% of their sales were generated from food or fuel, which allowed gas stations, diners, and establishments like that to stay open because they're generally 24-hour establishments. These types of businesses generally generate their highest numbers after the hour of 11 o'clock. So it allowed, and Palisades Park was sued and won because the judge said the township has the ability and the legal right to set its own hours of business within the township. So I had mentioned that a couple of years ago, and I don't know why that had never been pursued. Because if they, obviously, greater than 50% of their business is not going to be generated from food.
That's definitely something for us to talk about.
I think that if it passes all constitutional tests, should be added to the ordinance.
Okay, you'll look into that issue?
Yes.
The only thing I wanted to add, or actually, I'm sorry, why don't you go ahead? Do you have any comments on this?
I'd like to say it's about time. And one of the things that really miffs me about government is why this wasn't put in place a long time ago. I mean, how hard was this? Doesn't seem like it was too difficult. I mean, what? It really, it befuddles me. Something that's been an issue for so long, something that was so easy to remedy, was never done. And I'm not blaming, I mean, I'm looking back 10, 15 years and saying why. I hope you have 10 more like this of things that need to be fixed that haven't been, that can be fixed so easily, and it hasn't been done before. Let's get it fixed now. Thank you for your time and effort into this, paying attention to it. I really appreciate it, Mr. Janetsky.
The only comment I have, Mr. Janetsky, is I find particularly offensive the signs. And I had reason to stop, and I stopped at the florist on Route 9, not too far from the McDonald's on the southbound side. And the owner of the establishment has written to me, has called me, and is most unhappy about the establishment that's right next door. It's not terribly far, in fact, from Mr. Bongiovanni's office. And it's the signage, and when you have a beauty parlor that's right next door and a florist that's next door, and this business owner's perspective is, I have customers who come here to buy flowers, or people go to the hair salon in the next store, and the signage is disrespectful, and the materials that are hanging in the window as a 4 and 5 and 6-year-old walk by are really distasteful, and it does not help business. So while there's a constitutional right for people to be in the business that they choose to be in, albeit we all find it distasteful, I'm wondering, is there anything that we can do for those that are currently in business where we can change something so that the signs don't have to be as offensive? And I'm not certain if any of that can be done. I'm glad we're correcting this so that new businesses can come in. Fortunately, there have not been any add-ons where we've inherited more of these. It's been largely a continuation of those businesses that have been here, many for 20, 25 years. But the ones that are here now,
Two new ones, man.
they're using an existing, though, because the one that's next to that florist, they contend that they have a grandfather provision because they sold adult material there before. Now, and I could be mistaken. That's what they told all of the tenants that share that building.
But I'll address your question. You and the rest of the governing body actually sent back the signed ordinance associated with the master plan, looking for some language that would deal with that matter.
Correct.
And we were looking at that and considering doing this as one packet, but we thought, given the land use ordinances that are in the pipeline, we wanted to get this going, and then we're going to be following up with the sign ordinance.
But could we go back retroactive? Can we can we change a law that says, if you're already in business, we know that you give all these protections, but that offensive sign, there is no grandfathering protecting you on signs.
What I've seen with sign ordinances is if that, signs don't last necessarily that long. And what I've seen with ordinances, if that they get damaged to a certain extent, then they have to be replaced entirely, in which case they would have to comply with the design standards of the sign. Not saying that we can specifically eliminate that language, but there's things that are common to that industry that they would no longer be allowed to do in terms of the size of the lettering, the characterizations, things like that. So when they came in for a zoning permit for a new sign, they would have to redesign the sign significantly.
Okay, any other questions on this? Are we prepared? So you want us to workshop this?
Well, now, and then I'd like to introduce on the 24th.
Okay. Any other comments, or we're going to move on this on the 24th?
The only other note that I did write, I did recall, and I wrote that note down, that on the fuel and the food, on the time limits. And I also wanted to, I think that if we can just put some verbiage in there on the neon signs, you know, if there's can be something in there, even though we have a sign ordinance, and I don't know what our sign ordinance states on times where they have to be off and on when businesses are open and closed, but maybe that's what we need to have in our sign ordinance. When a business is closed, the lights have to be off.
Right, you know, Councilwoman Schomaker, it's amazing to me that when we have a church come in front of the planning board, we regulate the hours that the lights can be on for the sign at the church.
Yes.
But for these dogs, we don't have any regulations.
Well said.
No, but I think that it just gives us another layer of protection if we have all these teeth and all these overlays of protection in all the different ordinances, and they're all the same.
Okay, we'll take these back. And
Okay. What else under reports, Mr. Trignazzi?
Okay, Mayor, there's one item that we were thinking was going to have to be a matter of legislation or ordinances, but I think it's really just a matter of policy, sort of as we've been doing policies regarding a very pressing problem in terms of resident complaints that we get in my office and in the engineering and land use office. You have a letter, a memo to me that was in front of you that was addressed to the solicitor regarding an issue that, you know, in a sense doesn't exist anymore in terms of us creating them, but because council adopted an ordinance sometime back with respect to buffers, where now a developer needs to account for a resident's backyard when calculating their buffer. But in my 14-month tenure here, I must have received a dozen complaints about the fact that residents can't use their backyards because it's part of a farmland buffer or some other buffer. And I attached to my memo an example for you. And if you would just sort of turn to this picture, what you have is a resident whose back steps off her kitchen have been removed and replaced with a vinyl fence because the back steps encroached upon a 50-foot farmland buffer. And, you know, quite frankly, when she called me to her house, I sort of laughed out of embarrassment that that's kind of the condition here. And so we're trying to search for a way where we could deal with this in a responsive manner to our residents. And Mr. Bonju, we toyed with the idea of having an ordinance that allows people to go back to the planning board at a reduced fee to amend the site plan or something along those lines. But Mr. Bongiovanni's done some research and has a proposal that he'd like to share with you.
Okay, Mr. Bongiovanni, what do you have?
Basically, you just adopt a resolution regarding this particular property and then any other properties that might have the same problem as may be reported to us, and then simply abandon the easement or dedicate the easement back to the property owner, which would be...
What folks from the public, hold on.
Which would be consistent with what the council did in amending the ordinance to begin with. Under the new ordinance, people in these circumstances, they can't. This builder, when they gave this easement to the township, obviously did not. I can't imagine he explained to the residents what they were buying. And in a hardship case like this, the council certainly could give relief in that regard.
Let me just clarify one thing, that what we talked about is not that we would give the easement back, but we would, so in the case that you're looking at, there's actually a 50-foot farmland buffer. What we would do, sorry? Okay, what we would do is grant an easement on top of the easement for less than that, but to be reasonable with the resident. And we would have to take it on a case-by-case basis.
Right, because you can't say it's always going to be 25, it's always going to be 30, it's always going to be 10.
Right.
Right,
So
and-
who would have the ultimate discretionary authority to make that determination? It goes back to the planning board?
Well, in this case, what we would do, for example, you could see in the left-hand side of the picture, the fence, which is just about 25 feet. Okay, but the easement, buffer easement is 50 feet. What we would do is have the council is the owner
Yeah.
of the easement.
Okay.
So the council gets to decide what it can do with the easement, and you can grant, what an easement is a right. Like if you think of property as a basket of rights. So you have this little basket of rights, you could take a little piece of it and say, okay, you can have a little bit of a right for something else.
Okay, Mr. Howell?
Mayor, Tom, the picture that you're showing, that you have here,
Yes, sir.
with the one with the PVC fence across the back so nobody opens the door and falls out, I'm looking further down that line. I see a paver patio,
Yeah.
you know, a shed. I see a PVC fence further down, and then it looks like I see a gazebo even further down. So right now, are all of those people violating the buffer?
No, sir, it cuts in at an angle across that second yard. So if you notice, it just cuts in at an odd angle where this resident is uniquely affected.
And,
Somehow we need to find a way to
since-
give relief to this
yeah,
person.
well, since you
They
own,
need steps coming out their back door into their backyard.
I think and the mayor had asked a question of who would have the authority if this goes to the planning board?
no,
It would
you
be,
own,
yeah, it would
I think
just be
Mr. Bongiovanni's
insane.
recommendation was to come
you
here.
own the easement, you have the right to give another easement to it, or on top of it, as Mr. Chernitsky described it. At first, we toyed with the idea of an ordinance to try to fix the problem as it may apply to various people. But this seems to be the most practical solution to the problem.
The only other thing, if, just offer a comment on this, and this came up with respect to the whole pool issue. And I recall that we had recommended, I may ask Mr. Chernetsky, Mr. Nunziato, to refresh my memory, we were going to have some sort of an internal administrative committee that would review issues with a parallel to this. Mr. Nunziato, do you remember what I'm talking about? Is that, just refresh my memory, because it's been a while.
Mayor, it's part of my report.
Okay.
But there is a follow-up to that.
No, the reason I mention it, I mean, there is a committee, right? It's made up of internal administrators
Correct, we've been studying the matter.
that are studying the issue.
Right, this is,
Okay.
it's part of the big buffer.
See, what I was going to suggest is, and maybe it's the council's pleasure to have this, but to tell a resident that they might have to come here and make their case here, we could potentially, maybe in addition to what Mr. Bongiovanni has offered, suggest that an internal committee comprised of the manager and the engineer and someone else internally review these and act within some reasonable tolerance, and you can report back to us, rather than have this become the place where people come and have to go through that process. And I just, not that we can't not get engaged in it, but is that something we really want to do here? Maybe the answer is yes. I'd like to see someone be able to make an appointment when it's convenient for them, not have to come out here in an evening, and if we have a resolution that creates a set of parameters, and that we have a certain group of internal professionals who we pay to run the municipality, they look at it, it's reasonable. If the person then suggests that their interaction with the internal committee wasn't to their satisfaction, maybe they can come here and we'll hear it as a final resolution kind of a situation. They may want 30 and you're willing to give them 20. This way we're not back involved in it at this level.
I think the problem is that as the board of directors, you are ultimately responsible for property you own.
Mhm.
And so perhaps one way we could think about it is to say, if there's a minimum disturbance of a certain percentage, then council would be okay with us placing that on a consent agenda. But anything above it would have to be discussed.
I think that's a fair response to that. I'm just mentioning it to the council. I mean, we're not here to get into every little specific detail where we can help the resident more quickly, grant them the relief that they may need, and we've given you direction.
Okay.
Is that, Mr. Bongiovanni, in your judgment, is that from a legal perspective, we have the authority to do that?
Legally, it's fine.
Okay.
It's a sound policy, but as a policy matter, I think it's an excellent suggestion to make the distinction between the consent and the non-consent.
Okay. Anyone have any concerns with this recommendation?
Man, the only thing I would say now is, and I know it because I heard it from dozens of residents, is they went in and during the reval and said, well, hey, look, you got to lower my reval number because that's an easement, I can't use it. Now, how is that going to change things in the tax office if that becomes now what was a non-usable rear yard now becomes usable land? So now, are they going to have to get reassessed all over again?
That would be a call for the tax assessor.
Mr. Mayor,
Ms. Dalton, sure, I'm sorry. Go right ahead.
can we just put it into perspective for many of the residents who don't quite understand? When you have a farmland buffer easement of, in this case, 50 feet on your property, what are you allowed, if anything, to do with your land?
Nothing.
Buffer and buffer
You
nothing.
can't go out there and kick a ball with your kid. You can't
Well,
roll around in the grass.
That stuff you can do.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can use it.
Yeah.
You're right.
If you take a folding chair and a table and you want to have a picnic with your kid in your easement area on the nice grass that's growing, because you don't have a patio there. You can stick the chair there. You could have a
Yes.
barbecue.
Yeah.
Could you have a birthday party with a tent?
Yes.
As long as it was not something
permanent
that was
structure.
permanently installed.
Okay, so I want to understand, because I want to understand what it is people are telling the tax assessor about they can or can't use their property. Because those sound like uses to me.
Right.
I have a conservation easement. It's over 1.5 acres of property. But I can use my land because I can walk around in it and look at the trees that I'm not allowed to touch.
I don't know if the tax assessor is, and if the reval company is exactly doing as may have been reported by residents. I know when I went through this appeal process for nearly 7 years as in that capacity as special counsel, the issue of easements is not that simple. They don't just say, well, I have an easement back there, and therefore cut my assessment. It doesn't work that way.
So can I continue?
Please go right ahead.
In this particular situation, we're talking about an easement to allow the homeowner to get back the little set of steps that she had before, correct?
Well, I wouldn't think if you grant them an easement on top of the easement, they can do whatever they want, not just put the stairs back. They could put a built-in pool there.
Well, we can.
And-
There was room.
Right, if they have the room now, they can put a built-in pool there, or you're changing the configuration of the property, but it may have been that buffer because of drainage issues and the way the property sloped away, and now you're gonna allow them to change the topography of the land.
Why?
There's so many
What's
unique
that?
circumstances. We really searched high and low for an ordinance, a blanket ordinance, but there's so many unique circumstances. I think in this case, what you would do is provide a certain amount of feet back to allow for all accessory uses that are allowed in the zone. Whatever accessory use is common to a residential use. But I'll point to another circumstance. Now, in this particular easement, it says that this farm buffer easement is in existence so long as there's a farm. Okay? So, now, not all the easements had that language. Now, we have people in this similar circumstance who now back up to a residential subdivision and have almost identical situations. So
Right, they had to provide
ultimately-
the 50 when they built, and then the other development that eventually built behind them had to build 50, so now there's 100.
Right, but the easement language didn't specify they come out. So it's truly a case-by-case issue.
Anything else, Mrs. Dahl?
No.
Okay. All right, I think you have your direction on that, Mr. Chernetsky. You guys will get back to us.
Thank you.
What else do you have under reports? Is that it?
Well, two things, Mayor. We need to get on a budget date.
Yep.
For one thing, and just to follow up on your question to the engineer, we are studying how to improve customer service in that building, and Mr. Nunziato evaluated the complaints that we received and what's slowing things down that would frustrate people who we really do need to get them to come in and get an engineering permit. And what we found is that that there's a missing link in our system. And at the present time, a resident has to come in and get a zoning permit. You know, they show where they're going to put the pool, meet all the side yard setbacks, what have you. Then they have to go to the engineering department and get an engineering permit, which has two parts. It has a pre-construction inspection where we document the condition of the sidewalk and we document the condition of the curbs. Because in Howell, we maintain the curbs and the sidewalks, and in many communities, that's not the case. It's the responsibility of the private homeowner. We also go, and because we have some small lots, we take a look at the plans and try to determine how they're going to impact the drainage on neighboring properties. Then they get a construction, but those permit, the zoning permit, the engineering permit, those can be granted, and the property owner may not pull the trigger on that permit for like 2 years. They just wanted to see if they could do it, what the issues are, but may not be ready to buy it. And what we're finding now is that in terms of the system, the construction department will close out a permit and then realize that they never got a final inspection at the engineering department. And in many cases, the property owner isn't even the same person who applied for it originally. And that takes up a lot of time dealing with those residents and trying to resolve those problems. So we can save a great deal of time and then bring a focus onto the current customers if we put a mechanism in place that forced people in to get a final engineering approval. So what we're recommending is that we establish a $500 deposit, not a fee, not an escrow deposit, just a deposit. And then that would not be released until such time as they come for their final inspection. They would then could use that money for patio furniture or you know, a grill or whatever you typically get with the pool. But we think that would really improve customer service. I know it doesn't, you know, charge someone $500, we're going to improve customer service. I know that's what it sounds like.
It's exactly what it sounds like.
But when we analyze the process, we think that would relieve a great deal of frustration. And it's really not a fee. They would get that money back. So that's what we're contemplating.
Maybe I'm missing something. What's the $500 do for us?
It forces the resident back for a final engineering inspection.
Okay.
A lot of times they don't come back.
Mayor, can I
But
comment?
if they don't come back, sure, but then they don't get, wouldn't we know something was opened? And so wouldn't we follow up after some frequency and make sure that they weren't swimming in the pool that we never finalized?
In many cases, they never pull they go for the permits, but then never pull the trigger on the application or do it many years later.
So look, before I ask Mrs. Showmaker, just from a process perspective, not to work the issue here, why wouldn't we twice a year send a letter to anyone that has something open saying, according to our records, you opened this, it hasn't been completed. As a result, you best not be in your swimming pool, otherwise you would have a problem. Please return this back acknowledging that you're not. Rather than asking the person who followed, it's like you go to church on Sunday and Father Vona says, we're all the people that, you know, how come there isn't anybody here at church? Well, you're preaching to the wrong people.
Well, we're doing that and they're very angry that we do this 2 years later. But in reality, a zoning permit is good for about 2 years. So you don't even have to go to the construction office. You don't even have to start your pool project. So we issue these permits because residents just want to plan sometimes.
Okay.
Mayor, I can tell you that I agree with you that we should be sending letters out. Unfortunately, the letters that we do send out are the, you didn't close your permit, $7,500, that's your penalty.
Well, I saw that one too.
Yeah.
Many people didn't know.
And then we all get the phone calls.
Oh, we get the call.
You know, I believe you got a copy of the same email I got, where a fella pulled a permit 11 years ago and they just found out it wasn't, and it had been 2 or 3 other permits pulled on the same house.
Thankfully, that $500 was, I think, turned into $50 because someone looked at it and made, oh, I'm sorry. Well, that was reasonable. The poor person had right to be unhappy. Yeah. Do you want the council to take action on this tonight? You're going to give us something more formal? What are you asking us to do?
Well, we'd like to propose an ordinance for council to consider, maybe a discussion, continued discussion, and
Mrs. Showmaker, you had wanted to make a comment, I'm sorry.
Well, actually, he may, Mr. Howell made the comment, I think this has become because of that, and there has to be a better process of, I don't want to use the word follow-up, but for lack of other than using that word follow-up, I think there has to be a better process on our part for closure. There has to be a time, either expiration or something where we have follow-up, where we're not getting letters, because as a resident or as a business owner, if there is something that there has to be a time of essence or an expiration because of the same email that we're all referring to. After 11 years, it's a little, I would be embarrassed to go back and say, oh, by the way, you owe me $2,000 that you didn't pay me for in 1997. They would, they'd say go scratch.
Right.
But to charge somebody $500, some people would say, you know what, it's not worth it. Just like the person who defies an ordinance that we have that prohibits them from doing something. If they have deep pockets, they'll pay that fine to do what they want to do. Same thing here. If they're not going to get their final approval because something they're doing that they shouldn't be doing, or they just don't want to do it, they may not care about it. So I don't know if that's really the answer, or that's the solution to the problem that we have here.
Okay.
I don't want to deter you, but I'm just saying, I don't know. I'm thinking that there has to be a way with computers and technology today that we can better keep a handle on what's going out and what needs to come in without charging someone a $500. And like for instance, when I put somebody's money in escrow, the first thing they ask me is, that could be an interest-bearing account. So, I mean, I'm just thinking out of the box.
Frankly, trust me that most of these aren't 11-year-old type things, but what we do in a construction department when we've slowed down a little bit is we go back to open construction permits, and that's where we're now seeing a wave of these complaints, and in many cases, it's not even the original owner anymore. And we're finding that they never came for a final, they never final construction or final engineering. So we want to keep them, in a way, it's sort of like privatizing in a way, because it puts the incentive on the property owner, and they'll get their money back.
Believe me, I understand what you're proposing here. I just don't know if it's really going to be the answer to this, if it's going to be a solution to the problem that we have of open permits. And that's what you're trying,
right.
And that's what you're trying to achieve, correct?
Well, actually, our perspective is that of how do we make it more streamlined for the customer that comes into the door. And a great deal of our time, what we found in looking at this, is dealing with the residents that are very upset about these sort of things. So you're completely right. That's not the answer. That's not the total answer. But the answer is to, in management lingo, is to create enough organizational slack by taking these things that are great consumers of time so we can focus on the people who are coming in. And so, but there's probably a number of things we can address, number of things we can streamline, different tools, and we think that might be one of them. The other thing we're looking at is large lots. In some instances, it may not make sense to do an engineering review on a very large lot for drainage issues. But again, we fall into the trap of the township having many buffers, and also the town being the owner of the sidewalk, which I would tell you, frankly, Bill, 30% of the cases, the sidewalks and the curbs get damaged during the course of constructing a pool. So, but we are looking at that also. So it's a combination of tools we want to bring to the problem.
Mr. Howell, you had a comment?
Yeah, Tom, the thing with the sidewalk and the curb hits me home, yeah, and Bill will know what I'm talking about. When you turn in your paperwork for your permits, you have to turn in a copy of your survey. My survey clearly shows there's no sidewalks, no curbs. Yet I had to have that sidewalk and curb inspection. I had to pay for somebody to come out and say,
That's ridiculous.
yeah, there's no sidewalk and no curb. And I had to, the process had to be held up until, you know, you fall into a schedule. You know, and I believe it's not just sidewalks and curbs. I think they look at the land so that when they come back out, they make sure that the drainage is right and stuff. So it's not just sidewalks and curbs, but, you know, when you look at that survey and say, before you even issue the permit, it shows no sidewalks and curbs, well, okay, we don't need to go out and look for them.
Right, and engineering, the engineering department, because of the inspections and then the engineering analysis that we're required to do, is the larger holdup in the process. But let me say this, my initial argument was, why do we do an engineering review? Most towns don't do that. But what I'm finding is that many more towns are now looking, well, look what Howell does, and that's a good idea.
Oh,
We ought
God.
to do that as well.
Oh,
So
The
so
pool
that's
companies
the
will
other
be
side
not
of that
working in many
coin.
more towns.
But having said that, I think there's a middle ground, but what we need to do is match the resources we have with the customers, and the way we do that is by lopping off some of the time wasters.
I'm just going to, a couple of quick comments on it, it's not to belabor it here, but more government is, or less government is better. And that's just, I can only speak for myself, but less is better. I haven't really commented on this from the dais because we're just about finished with it, but we decided to put a pool in this year. So when we interviewed the different companies that came to our house, I regularly don't want to run and tell people, hey, I'm the mayor. And I certainly didn't bring it up when we had any of the companies come in, and they wouldn't have known. Every single company, and this is not meant to be disrespectful to our employees, because they didn't create these processes, they've been charged with enforcing them. So this is not a reflection on our township employees at all. In fact, they do the job. They hold people accountable to the laws that our predecessors created. Some are good, some aren't. Of everyone we interviewed, every one of them said, your mail address is Freehold. Is this Freehold, or are you really Howell? And when we indicated we were really Howell, and I'm not exaggerating, most, if not, with the exclusion of one, actually said, I need to be candid with you, we hate to do work in your town. The processes are completely non-user friendly. It adds more cost. We actually had one individual tell us he charged an extra fee for dealing with the Township of Howell because of the uniqueness and the complexities of the process. And again, this is not a criticism of our employees. They do the job very, very well. But the fact of the matter is, looking at this purely from a business perspective, not working the issue here, and I appreciate everything you folks are putting at it, and you do this for a living, we don't. But my observation is the entire process has to be totally and completely mapped out, blown up, and started over. I think there needs to have to be less engagement, less stops and goes, less reason to have to come here. I don't know what's in our purview, what the state law requires, all this general code business. Some of it we can't control. But I truly believe that one of the things to consider is to have a small work group of a couple of people who actually build pools for a living, maybe the member of the council, maybe the engineer, maybe a couple of residents, do a focus group and walk somebody through. When I was a kid, there was a cartoon on Saturday mornings, how a bill becomes a law, and they kind of walk you through the whole process. Walk through the whole process and try and just re-engineer the whole thing. And this is not meant to throw water on the idea, but just to say, hey, we're going to make $500 to make you go through the process faster so they're closed. It seems like we're not fixing, we're trying to cure a symptom, but we're not really fixing what's truly wrong. And what's truly wrong is, I think, the process just needs to be totally re-engineered to make it much simpler for people. Because for the average resident that is able to save up and put a pool, and this is a great opportunity and a great experience, and then just dealing with the bureaucracy, I mean, I give my wife all the credit in the world. I couldn't have done it, and we kept a low profile, did everything according to what the books required, but it wasn't the easiest process. And that's just my comment. We don't have to work the issue here, but I think a lot of people would probably feel that way, that it's not easy getting a pool if you live in Howell.
Mayor, would you be open to an ordinance which, on the one hand, may include some fee, but on the other hand, removes a step or two for some areas. And
I think we'd all agree that if the process could be streamlined and made simpler and easier and faster, if it meant that potentially, look, if someone's going to put a pool in nowadays, in an in-ground pool, it is not an inexpensive proposition. So if the resident can be assured that their pain will be lessened and they'll be more satisfied with the outcome, but it meant maybe an extra couple $100 to what is a several $1,000 expenditure, they'd probably go along with it rather than deal with what they have to deal with now. I can't speak for everybody here, but does that sound reasonable?
Reasonable.
Yeah, I'm okay. Address the problem.
Right.
I mean, I
gotta fix
just
the
agree with the
process.
mayor, address the problem.
Okay.
All right, I think you have your
Yes.
direction on where we are in this. What else do you have, Mr. Jansky?
Mayor, we need to,
Schedule a budget
we
date.
need to schedule a budget.
All right,
We-
what are you
We've tried to
suggesting?
coordinate everyone.
Now,
Um,
I think there's been difficulty in getting calendars.
Yeah, we've tried very hard, but at this point, what I recommend is the April 25th, which is a Wednesday, it'd be the night after a previous, our 24th council meeting.
April 25th, which is a Wednesday.
Yeah.
How is everybody on Wednesday, April 25th?
And if any council member can't make it, we'll drop off the DVD the next day.
All right, sounds like that really needs to be the
What
night.
That
time,
needs to
Tom?
happen.
What time?
Well, that would be the only...
I think the only Mrs. Showmaker has
I have
expressed
to-
a few
I have
times, 6:30 is
expressed
not
for
good.
like over the years.
So could we do 7 o'clock as a
6:30
start?
is
Sure,
so
no closed
hard for
session
me.
that night,
All
just
right.
budget.
Mrs. Dalton, is that an okay date?
6:30
All right, you have
is
your
so hard
date,
for me.
April 25th, 7 o'clock
I'm gonna
in
get
these
tickets.
chambers.
Okay.
For my own
Thank you.
Okay,
That's
anything
it.
else?
That's it for me.
Okay. Mrs. Dalton, we'll start with you. What do you have under reports?
I'm gonna forego.
Given the hour, there's a number of things I want to comment on that are on the agenda, so I'll just pass on a report tonight.
Okay. Mr. Howell?
Mayor, there was just really two things I wanted to touch on. One of them being that just slightly less than 2 weeks ago, I'm sure everybody remembers that there was a terrible plane crash in the Parkside development. What I don't know that everyone is aware of is that at one point in time on that night, every piece of fire apparatus in this township was out someplace, because I believe Squonkam and Ramtown Fire Departments responded to the plane crash, along with the foam truck from Wall Township. Then there was while you and I were speaking to the fire chief, there was a call on Washington Avenue in the mobile home development. And then shortly after that, there was a terrible house fire. So at one point in time, every piece of fire apparatus in this town was on a road, somewhere, doing something. I live close to that crash site, and I was at that crash site within minutes behind the first fire vehicle that arrived. I reached out for the mayor. The mayor was there probably within 10 minutes of getting that phone call. I tried to reach out to the deputy mayor, but he was watching the town back at the Board of Ed budget meeting. The other thing I don't know if everybody's aware of is how the mayor represented the township that evening. He got on that scene, he got all of the information that he could possibly gather, because he knew that he was going to be the face of the township that night for the news reporters, both, media and, print media as well as television. And I remember a couple of years ago during the Parkway water hearings, someone, I believe it might have been George Krebs, saying that your actions that evening at the Parkway water meeting were your shining moment. And I have to believe that the night of that plane crash probably outshone that evening.
Thank you.
So that's all I wanted to say about that.
Thank you, Mr. Howell. I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
The other thing I wanted to bring up to the council, and I had spoken to you about it, was a bill that's been passed in the Assembly and passed in the Senate, and was actually written and introduced in the Assembly by Assemblywoman Jennifer Beck. I believe she's from the 12th District.
He is.
And it allows for more township control over notification of developments. It also allows for notification to be pushed from 200 feet to 300 feet. It also would require that signage around the development go from one side to four sides. So she introduced it, and it was passed in the Assembly. It then went up to the Senate, and it was introduced by Senator Barbara Buono and Senator Karcher. And I called Assemblywoman Beck's office to find out why this has been sitting there for months. And sadly, it's been sitting there because the chairman of the Housing and Local Government, I believe, is a Democrat and doesn't want a Republican to have credit for doing this close to the election. So I would like to ask that the council draft a letter to Chairman Green of the Committee of Housing and Local Government, asking him to post the bill before the end of the session in May, so that this can be finalized, and that we as a township can start requiring this of developers and zoning board applicants. So if that would be, the council, I would really like to see that.
Should we not only do that, I think we should do like other municipalities do, make sure that our township manager forwards it to the other municipalities in our surroundings so they can jump on it with us
That
to give a
would be
little
great.
bigger push.
That would be great.
Excellent idea.
I think, can we prepare a resolution for our next meeting? Mr. Howell's points don't need anything further read. He's right on the money.
No. All right, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Howell. Mrs. Shoemaker on the
I'll
reports.
forego in light of the time.
Deputy Mayor.
Just one little thing I wanted to mention to everyone, this is Autism Awareness Month, and there are some things going on in the township this month. I believe tomorrow night we're picking up the uniforms. The Challenger League will be starting for special needs children in Howell North Little League, and there'll be some other things coming up in the next 4 to 6 weeks. There'll be a bowl-a-thon at Howell Bowling Lanes, and there'll also be a golf outing at Eagle Oaks Country Club for autism. And just everybody keep them all in your prayers. The special needs families all need the prayers, folks. That's all, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Walsh. I just have a few items, Mr. Chinyetsky. The first is I want to thank Councilman Howell for his very generous remarks. I appreciate it. Councilman Howell went out of his way to make me aware of it before I had even gotten notified by the manager or the police department. And Mr. Howell and I shared a lot of time together that night, both being grateful because the situation could have been a lot worse. And there were several residents, and I wish I could remember I wish I actually had the list of all of their names. I'm trying to go back and piece it together. There were more than one resident who actually, when that plane went down, ran to the plane in an effort to try and pull out the pilot. And we were standing next to one of those individuals, and Councilman Howell and I were both pretty shaken up when he was relaying his story about how he tried as he could, and then finally there was smoke and flames and he had to back away. And this person was pretty broken up that he couldn't save that person. It was certainly was a very emotional night for a lot of people. People were very grateful. So thank you for your comments, Mr. Howell. A couple things, Mr. Chinyetsky. I had gotten a call from the pastor at St. Veronica's Church. It's just easier to mention it here. They're putting in some sort of a device that's going to function as a bell, if you will. And they were unsure who to sort of reach out to make sure that there wasn't anything they needed to do by way of approval to be able to sound the bell at various times before, after a mass, or at a funeral. And I indicated I wasn't aware of anything that would prohibit them to do that, but I mentioned I would bring it up. It's St. Veronica's Church, and obviously in Howell Township. So if you could have the appropriate person contact them. They reached out to me just today before the meeting. I didn't have a chance to get to you sooner.
Okay.
The other question I had is, and just to maybe an update. Are we any further on video streaming on the township's website where we could create an area where you could view the council meeting online? I continue to still get a number of calls and emails from residents who either have a satellite or are in one of the areas where they live in Howell, but they don't have access to our cable system, and so they don't get the channel. And is that something that we have we've talked about it, I know we'd like to do it.
Yeah, I'm not certain that it's something we actually had, we had, we proposed it in the budget last year. I'm not sure it made it in light of our other priorities in MIS, meaning bringing the forms online and the telephone system in the building. But what MIS has uncovered is actually a free system that Microsoft makes available, except it's severely truncated. So what we thought we might do in the interim is focus on votes and discussions on specific issues as opposed to the whole meeting as a first step. And we could use free technology to make that happen.
So you're working on something to help
Yes, sir.
residents that do this?
Yes.
Okay.
Something about that, Mayor?
Please go right ahead, Mr.
Mr. Kniska, I brought to your attention a few weeks ago that Mr. Nicastro, one of our residents here in Howell, had spoken to me about someone who'd be interested in doing it for us.
Yes.
Appreciate if you get in touch with him about that. I know we spoke about it before I had to leave the state on business.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Just a couple things. Mr. Howell was kind enough to remind me to mention. Obviously, the school board election, both the local and the regional, are April 17th. If you go to, and I'll read out loud, the Township's school district's website, it's obviously www.howell.k12.nj.us. The budget presentation is online, and you can also view the narrated presentation. And there additionally remain some budget sessions available to the public in the event they've not been able to get to one thus far. There is one, actually it was this evening, at the Aldridge and Southard School. I'm sorry, for Aldridge and Southard at 7 o'clock. There's one tomorrow at 6:30. It's at the Ramtown Middle School South, and there's another session in Ramtown at Greenville at 7:30. There's one on Thursday the 12th, 7 o'clock at Ardenia and Middle School North, and also 7 o'clock at Lando Pines. And on the 16th, Newberry and Taunton are doing a combined meeting at Taunton. And at 7:30, also on the 16th, Adelphia Gribbling Memorial Middle School are having their meeting at Adelphia. So we certainly can't tell you how to vote. I think we would just encourage people to vote. So that's just a reminder that that election is coming up on the 17th. Anything else on reports we've missed? Okay. Just like to maybe call the council's attention to address these add-on issues. We'll just do that now, unless anyone has any disagreement. We have a variety of add-ons. They are obviously 9A2, 9B 27, 28, 29, 30, and 31. There are additional items. 32. I'm sorry, and 32. And 32 is the Best Buy? Right. Okay. And then all the items to take action on tonight, those are not required for add-ons, correct? You're just listing them because they need action, correct?
Right, so I guess a motion to add on, and
Okay.
then everybody's ready for action.
So, okay. Just that someone would please, we'll entertain a motion to add on the items as noted. I'm
So
sorry.
moved, Mayor.
Ms. Shoemaker, we first need to, as I'm reminded, we need a motion to go into regular session,
So moved, Mayor.
and we need a second.
Second, Mayor.
We have a second. Any remarks on regular session? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Mrs. Shoemaker?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mayor DeBella?
Yes. Okay, motion to add on, please.
Mayor, can we take a separate vote
Of course.
and remove, and I'd like
For
a
the
separate
add-ons?
vote on the add-ons on 9B28.
Absolutely. We're going to, let's vote on all items excluding 9B28. So we need a motion to add on all items excluding 9B28.
So moved, Mayor.
We have a motion, we need a second.
Second?
We have a motion and a second on all items excluding 9B28. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Mrs. Shoemaker?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mayor DeBella?
Yes. And we need a motion to independently act, please, on 9B28.
Mayor, before we, I don't know if it's appropriate now to voice,
Okay.
I believe that there was still some issues with the drainage at Lanes Mill Marketplace. That's why it's still here. And I'm wondering why we're returning maintenance guarantees if we're having problems with the detention basins and things over there.
Sure. Mr. Nunziato, are you prepared to comment on 9B28, sir?
I believe actually the guarantee is for the sewer. So it's not a site improvement maintenance guarantee.
That's just for the sewer connection from Route 9 into the complex? Or that doesn't have anything to do with the stormwater system that's from the parking lot to the detention basin?
The stormwater is under site improvements where the sewer is the pump station and the sewer infrastructure.
All right.
Okay.
All right, and Mayor, I make a motion for 9B28.
All right, we have a motion to add on 9B28. We need a second.
So moved, Mayor.
We have a motion and a second. Any remarks? Hearing none, roll call to add on 9B28, please.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Mrs. Showmaker?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mayor DeBella?
Yes. Okay, so now why don't we just, we have a variety of action items. This does apply, actually, you know what?
Are we going to continue 8A4?
Yeah, you want to just go, the pleasure of the council, we can go right into the 8A items and then come back and do the add-ons. Is that acceptable?
That's fine, Mayor.
Okay.
Why the public hearing and adoption are on the 24th?
Well, we do have 8A1. On 8A4, we do need to take action on 8A4 this evening. Is that right? All you want us to do on 8A4 is carry it to 424.
Yes.
And as I recall, all we're doing is carrying the hearing on 8A4, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right, so do you want to go to 8A1? This is 00710, amending the land use in the HD3. This was introduced on March 20th. We have a public hearing and an adoption scheduled for April 24th. Any questions or comments from the council on this item?
No.
Okay. All right, we can certainly come back if anyone has any comments. 8A2, again, this was introduced on March 20th. It's slated for a public hearing, adoption on the 24th. This is amending the zoning maps. 8A3, capital ordinance that expands the scope of improvements to be addressed with respect to the ambulance. We had our introduction on March 20th. The hearing and adoption is the 24th. We do need and will take action now on 8A4. What I'd like to suggest on 8A4, this is amending the land use, planned mixed-use district PMU, rezoning blocks 129, lot 85, 87, 88, 01, 88, 02, and Route 9. We did carry our public hearing from the meeting of March 20th. This was originally introduced on February 20th, and again, we began the hearing on March 20th. Mr. Bongiovanni, procedurally, do I need to reopen, or since we continued it, does that carry on?
I think you should, sorry. I think you should reopen it.
Give him a second.
I think you should reopen it in case anybody was intending to be here for this purpose tonight, and then at least they could put on the record, you know, a comment or two, and understand that we're going to be carrying it, you know, for the next meeting.
Okay.
Procedurally, I think that's the proper procedure.
Okay,
as
I
well
appreciate
as
your
being
guidance
fair.
on that. Thank you very much. All right, I'm going to, we've carried this hearing. I'm going to reopen the hearing with respect to this Article 8A4. Anyone from the public who would like to be heard for or against this, knowing it is going to continue on, please come forward. Mr. Maggot?
Mayor, I have one question.
Okay. Before you speak, Mr. Maggot, Mrs. Showmaker, go right ahead.
I have a legal question for Mr. Bongiovanni. On our ordinances that we're changing that pertain to the master plan, is there any, I think I asked this question and I didn't get a definitive answer, is there a conflict because you represented a group before on the zone changes, when we come to the zoning map? Is there a conflict?
When it comes to the zoning map?
Yeah, you know, on the amendment of the zoning map on 8A2.
I
Will there
don't
be
think-
any conflict because there was a lawsuit that you were the...
I haven't had any involvement in drafting that ordinance. B, I don't think you need any counsel on it, but if you do, we could go to outside counsel on that. C, if it
Mr. Bongiovanni, I'm just asking for clarification because
I'm trying-
you know long
trying.
enough, you've been in Howell long enough to know that this is a very unique town, and I just want to make sure that
Yeah.
we're open with
Okay,
everything.
my understanding is that you're not rezoning anything that any of my clients, owned.
Thank you for
Okay?
clarifying that.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I just want that on the record.
Sure. Mr. Magid, you have comments on 8A4.
That's correct.
Okay.
This is Abe Magid, 89 Mariners Cove. Okay, on the bottom of the first page, the language is, by providing for a community for older persons, all right, and all persons with or without children. So say persons with children, the needs of those not eligible for age-restricted houses can be met. So while this agreement was made with AST, it's certainly very nebulous, we'll say, whether people will end up who are senior citizens or younger people with children. Now, on page 2, I just want to read this part.
Thank you.
The third sentence, was designed for the needs of young families to serve that need. Again, we're talking about families. We're talking about young couples, maybe a child or two, that have a need for units of this type, not necessarily senior citizens. Page 3 does say maximum number of dwellings, 118. Okay. I go now to page 5. The maximum height, 3 stories, inclusive of the garage level. Now, also on page 5, going down to just below the paragraph where there's a lot of writing, paragraph C. It says, consistent with the intent of the district's homes ought to be designed principally to meet the specialized dwelling needs of older residents in smaller houses commonly known as empty nesters. Again, we seem to be saying a lot about these units for more or less senior citizens, meaning without children, empty nesters, and yet, seems to me, it's very wide open that a lot of these can certainly be filled. There's no stipulation that they can't. There's no quota or anything between senior citizens and young couples with 1 or 2 children. That's page 5. Page 6, I know this was covered at the last meeting, there's 18 affordable family units, more maybe than 15 because people will come to work in the area. And then, of course, it says on section 3, this will be built on 17.5 acres, and it's a planned mixed unit district, PMU. Now, I know that this was something we had to agree to. I also want to point out that in this agreement, which we have to agree to, and we're only acting on this one, it shows the light, so to speak, that people can come here with children. And I got something from the school district that's about $11,000 per child. I know the state applies maybe 30-odd%, but the taxpayers pick up the most. It's very expensive, I don't have to tell you. The person has 2 children already, $22,000 just for the child, according to the superintendent of schools. It seems to me, again, that in providing the agreement we had here, it also lights the light for building, whether they're apartment-sized units, I don't really know, or it doesn't even matter. They will be much lower ratables, obviously, than a single family, a good-sized one, 3,000 square feet or whatever, 2,500 square feet. So the people moving in there in these smaller units, aside from co-op, will be an increased tax burden on the people here. And on top of that, every time we get these smaller units rather than the larger ones, the co-op comes in with 1 unit per 8. Now, I want to make a point. I happen to pick up what's called the apartments and their rentals in New Jersey. And I didn't bother looking at the rest of the state. I looked at Middlesex and I looked at Monmouth County. And it is very, very, very expensive, even to just have an apartment. A studio, $1,000. One bedroom, easily $1,200, $1,300. Oh, they go. Some of them are tremendously high. $1,500, just like that. So with these people, they'll say to themselves, well, wait a minute here. My income is low, well, certainly not very substantial. I'm not going to pay $1,500 a month. I'll move into these smaller units. Well, that's all well and good. That's a humanitarian thing. But that pattern here in Howell, which is now wide open, a lot more open, I believe, than Marlborough and Alvin, pretty well filled up, is going to be a magnet for, call them smaller units if you want to use that euphemism. Whether it's a condo, I don't care what it is. It's going to mean the gates will be wide open because you didn't just make an agreement with AST. No, this is with AST. Somebody will come along. Later make a comment also because I noticed possibly Centrex homes might be in the same category. I'm not sure. I'll talk about that afterwards. What I'm saying is, there's an enormous, when we talked about increased taxes, maybe tax reevaluation, all kinds of things. I'm not talking about that. I'm saying as we proceed in Howell Township to provide what essentially 3-story buildings, could be apartments even, I mean smaller in size. And then on top of that, in comes affordable housing where they can be as low as 600 square feet and then maybe 800 or 1,000 with 2 or 3 children. Again, a very low tax rateable. What we're doing here is a recipe for tax burden disaster for the people living in Howell Township, because when you made this agreement with AST and say you were boxed in and stuff like that, but somebody else is going to come along and say, hey, well, you know, I'm going to fight you too. Give me the same deal. We should be making every effort constantly to have, as within the law, I guess. I don't know what the jurisdiction is of the Howell Township Town Council and Planning Board. You made a master plan to have as many of higher rateables at least as a break, so that if a house is say 2,500 square feet and they have a couple of children, you're still, well, it doesn't pay for the full amount, say $22,000 in property in school taxes, but at least it's a significant amount. With this is the recipe for disaster, and I want to point that out. And I want the council to start thinking today, tomorrow, next week, next month, next year.
Mayor, it's been 7 minutes.
What can we do about this? 4 minutes?
7. Sorry,
Oh,
I
7.
forgot
I'm
to keep.
sorry. Okay. Skedaddle, all right. I made my point. I want the council to think about it. Thank you very much. You're very kind. I owe you two.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Magid. Is there anyone else who'd like to comment on this? Sure.
Good evening. I'm Carl Wisner from 376 Conover Street, Howell.
Hello, Mr. Wisner.
Good evening. The last meeting, unfortunately, I don't have my notes with me tonight. I apologize. I've had a kind of a strange day, and I came straight here from my office, and I didn't get a chance to stop by the house and pick them up. But I know notes were taken on about a dozen questions I had at the last meeting, and because of time constraints, we didn't go over them then, and I was fine with that. And most of them were like clarifications of terms and things. Are they going to be responded to tonight, or?
Mr. Bongiovanni, when we...
I think you did go over them rather thoroughly at the one meeting that
I gave you
attended.
questions, I got zero answers, right. Oh, okay.
I thought you said that you didn't have time.
No, I didn't have
okay.
time for answers,
Yeah.
responses.
Since that time, Mr. Chernitsky has been in contact with COA Council on this, and as I said at the last meeting, we were obliged under this agreement to pass this ordinance.
Right.
But we're looking into whether or not we can renegotiate some of it. So
Really?
Mr. Chernitsky has most of the details on that. I just don't know if this would be a proper time to discuss it any further, and that's one of the reasons we're carrying it to the 24th.
I have no problem with that. That's a good answer for now. Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Wisner. Anyone else who'd like to comment, again, knowing we're going to continue to carry this? All right, seeing no one else, I'm going to close the public portion and ask a member of the council to please make a motion to carry this hearing to the council's meeting on April 24th.
So moved, Mayor.
We have a motion, we need a second, please.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any remarks on carrying? Okay, hearing none, roll call, please, to carry 8A4.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Mr. Showmaker?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mayor DeBella?
Yes. All right, we do have slated actually for this evening, we have 9A1, obviously, which is the towing ordinance, and we also have another ordinance as well, 9A2. Those are the only two ordinances, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, so we've added on, with respect to 9A1, tonight is the introduction, and I ask a member of the council to...
Motion to introduce ordinance number 0-07-17 on first reading by title and to order the same to be published in full in the 4/13/07 issue of the Asbury Park Press, together with notice of its introduction and passage on first reading by title, and that it be further considered for final passage after public hearing at a meeting of the Township of Council to be held on May 1st, 2007, 7:30 prevailing time in the municipal building.
We have a motion, we need a second, please.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Ms. Wallman, would you please read the title?
Yes, I will.
Jeez.
An ordinance of the Township of Howell, Monmouth County, New Jersey, amending Chapter 306 entitled Towing of the Code of the Township of Howell in order to amend, supplement, and revise said regulations.
Okay, we've had a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Mrs. Showmaker?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mayor DeBella?
Yes.
Mayor, if I may just offer a brief comment?
Go right
if that's
ahead.
Okay. One, first off, council directed us to go back following the original adoption of the ordinance in, I believe it was December, and appointed council members Dalton and Showmaker to work with the tower, myself, and the police department in crafting some compromises, and I just want to thank them for their guidance.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, and thank you to Mrs. Showmaker and Mrs. Dalton. We do have 9A2, which is another ordinance to be introduced. Reads as reserved Mount Laurel District, RMLD. I'd ask a member of the council to please proceed.
Motion to introduce ordinance number 0-07-12 on first reading by title and to order the same to be published in full in the 4/13/07 issue of the Asbury Park Press, together with notice of its introduction and passage on first reading by title, and that it be further considered for final passage of a public hearing at a meeting of the Township Council to be held on May 1st, 2007, 7:30 prevailing time in the municipal building.
We have a motion, we need a second.
Second.
May I ask if the councilwoman would also add to it, has to be amended, because I have some amended language, just the 2 words.
Okay.
So it has to be amended, and I can give you the amendment right now.
Sure,
Okay.
you're
Yes,
agreeable to amending?
Please, I would do so.
Ms. Bongiovanni, those amendments are?
Section 1, subsection 188-86.1D, paragraph 5, which talks about, which begins as an inclusionary development, the words will be changed to as an affordable housing development, as opposed to inclusionary, we're changing the words to affordable housing.
Okay. And Mrs. Showmaker, you're agreeable to
Yes, I'm
amend-
agreeable to that.
Introduction as amending, and Mrs. Dalton, did you offer the second?
Yes, that's.
And you're agreeable to that as well?
Yes.
That's
All right.
that's the only amendment, just that word?
Correct.
Okay, so from inclusionary to affordable.
Affordable housing.
So we have a motion and a second. Ms. Wallman, would you please read the title?
An ordinance of the Township of Howell, County of Monmouth, amending Chapter 188 Land Use Ordinance to provide for a new zoning district entitled Reserve Mount Laurel Site and rezoning certain lands into the district.
Okay, roll call, please.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Mrs. Showmaker?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mayor DeBella?
Yes. All right, if we look at our agenda, this might be an appropriate time to act on the actionable items, which include the 9B and 9Cs. Would anyone like a separate vote on 9B 21, 9B 24, 25, 26, 31, or 32?
I'd like a separate vote on 9B21, please.
Absolutely. Any other separate votes? Again, it's 21, 24, 25, 26, 31, and 32.
Maybe 25, just a question, is that the appraisers that we? Okay, Mr. Snitsky? Okay, just making sure about that.
Any other requests for a separate vote on any of those items?
Mayor, if I may.
Please.
I'd like to ask a question to our engineer. Under 9B 21, 22, on 21, it's site improvements, performance guarantee for site improvements. Are there any concerns there? These are performance guarantees.
Right. The only outstanding issue, I think we're still negotiating, and maybe Mr. Bongiovanni may be better versed, but we did have dialogue with traffic safety as far as the roads and their narrowness in Title 39 and how signage would be placed so that there would be no problem with emergency vehicles or traffic patterns with parking on sides of the narrow roads. Other than that, as far as, the site issues, there are none.
Okay.
Mr. Howell,
On 9B21, the question that I had was, I remember that developer coming back to the planning board because part of their original approval was that they had to have that emergency access road right near the traffic light by the corner. And they didn't want to put that in. They said that they couldn't get approval from the county because it was too close to a county road and a traffic light. They finally acquiesced and put it in. But now what that Grass Creek area has become is an additional parking lot. So it wipes out the entire intent of having that emergency entrance. So to this day, if you drive there right now, you're going to find 3 cars parked in that area, which is supposed to be an access for emergency vehicles.
That's an enforcement issue.
So what I believe we told them they had to do to avoid that becoming an issue was they had to put some kind of a barrier there to keep people from parking there. And I don't believe they've ever done that, or else those cars couldn't be parked there. I think they put a chain across the entrance on the main road, but not inside.
Well, if you would prefer, we can certainly look into the particulars of how that was to be either marked or delineated or enforced. And if you want to, unless, of course, there's a reason why we couldn't, let's say, table it or pull it for now, we can certainly investigate it and look at it. Or if you want, leave it on potentially for the next meeting, unless it needs action tonight.
Mayor.
Was there a reason this was on, that it needed action tonight, Ms. Woolman? Who? Mr. Bongiovanni, is there a reason this must be acted on tonight?
This is a CJS resolution. There's actually 2 on for tonight. One is an amended one from one that you passed at the last meeting, and the other is the remaining one for the other site improvements. The last one involved sewer. The settlement agreement, regarding the first one, which involves the sewer, the settlement agreement specified that the maintenance agreement has to be accepted from the date of December 21st, 2005. It had something to do with the way, when the applicant posted this, and that was the agreement. So when we adopted this resolution last 3 weeks ago, it just said that the maintenance guarantees to be for 2 years. It really should have said 2 years from the date of December 21st, 2005, because that's what the agreement we made with the applicant was. So that's stated right in the stipulation of settlement and dismissal. The other thing that's stated in that, the other thing that happened, which regards the other resolution for tonight, so that's why, anyway, that, on the first one, that's why that one's being amended regarding the sewer one we adopted 3 weeks ago. On the other one, the issue came up about why this applicant still had not received his rather substantial refund from the release of the performance guarantee. And I went back and forth with the, this was a case that was litigated up until the end of last year. I went back and forth with the attorney for this, who was threatening to go to the judge to seek enforcement as to why he still didn't have his money from the release of the performance guarantee. Reason being that the resolution that was adopted on December 19, 2006, which authorized the signing of the settlement, stipulation of dismissal, said that it was to be effective, immediately. He had already posted the $10,000 that he was supposed to. This is the case that involved the taxes, the tax lien, and he had already posted that $10,000 before the settlement was reached. So I talked to Mr. Nunziato about something that the applicant was requesting in lieu of seeking enforcement and all that. There's threats of going to Judge Lair to seek enforcement on this agreement. He stated, take all the time you want but I would like the resolution of December 19th to be the effective date of the maintenance guarantee that will be adopted tonight, with the performance guarantee being released for the rest of the site improvements. We now have a maintenance requirement for 2 years. So he just wants that to date back from the date of the settlement resolution, which is December 19, 2006. So, make a long story short, your usual resolution would just say 2 years for the maintenance agreement. This one says 2 years from December 19, 2006. I thought the explanation was necessary because it is a slightly unusual form for a performance guarantee, which I didn't even want to have this resolution adopted tonight, but after consulting with Mr. Filiatro about it in terms of what's normally needed to authorize release of funds, township funds, I thought it was best to adopt another resolution, and at the same time to comply with the settlement agreement to specify that the date of the maintenance guarantee begins on December 19th, 2006.
So, Mr. Margiani, it sounds like we don't have a choice but to act on 9B21 tonight.
Well, the reason is that.
Please just say yes or no. Yes, please.
I agree with the attorney for the applicant that we would do that in lieu of any.
So we need to act on it tonight.
Well, here's what we can do. To quell your concern, if in fact the emergency access way is being used as a parking area and it is not to be, we'll look at our plans, we'll look at the signage that's going to be required for the no parking areas, and if we need to add an additional sign or two or whatever needs to be done to make sure that that is an emergency access and not an overflow parking, we will do that.
All right, so why don't we have, since we're going to act on 9B21 separately, why don't we move on 9B21 first? If someone would please introduce a motion.
Well, may I
I'm
just...
sorry, go right ahead, Ms. Dahl.
If we're going to act on 9B21 separately, are we also going to act on 9B31 separately?
We can if you would like us to.
I mean,
you want a separate on 9B31?
I don't particularly have a problem with it, but I think we
That's
should
a
be
very good
consistent
point.
and act on
Okay.
both of them or neither of them.
It's a very fair point. So why don't we first do a separate vote on 9B21, please?
No, I'll make a motion.
Okay, we have a motion. We need a second, please.
Second?
We have a motion on 9B21 for approval. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Mrs. Showmaker?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mayor DeBella?
Yes. And we need now, please, a separate vote on 9B31.
So moved.
We have a motion. We need a second.
Second.
And we have a second. Any remarks? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mrs.
9B31.
Dalton?
Yes.
Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Mrs. Showmaker?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mayor DeBella?
Yes. Okay, and we can collectively move on, if it's the pleasure of the council, 9B 24, 25, 26, and 32.
Motions?
Oh, I think we got to do the motions only because there are some appointments.
Okay.
So we probably have to look at those separately.
Which one is 32, Mayor? I don't see that.
It's an add-on, it's the Best Buy. It's in,
Oh, okay.
it's in the packet here tonight for the sewer.
Mayor, I'll make a motion that we approve those.
Okay.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. This is for 24, 25, 26, and 32. We have a motion and a second. Any remarks? Okay, hearing none. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Mrs. Showmaker?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mayor DeBella?
Yes. All right, does the council, or any member of the council, have any other questions on the non-actionable 9B items that you'd like to bring up now? Mr. Walsh?
Are we going to add somebody to the Shade Tree Commission tonight? Or are we gonna,
I think we do have to act, well, you raise a good point. If there's no other question on the 9Bs, obviously we'll revisit them at the agenda meeting. With respect to the 9C items, under 9C1, 9C2, 3, 4, and actually I think it's just really 9C1, 2, 3, and 4. The others we can move collectively. In fact, would someone please make a motion to move 9C5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11?
So moved, Mayor.
We have a motion, we need a second.
Second.
We have the motion and a second. Any comments? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Mrs. Showmaker?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
yes.
Mayor DeBella?
Yes. All right, so now we can focus on these open appointments. On 9C1, we need to act or potentially take action on the 2 alternate positions to the Farmers Advisory Committee. One term shall expire at the end of next year, and the other will expire at the end of 2009. So would a member of the council like to introduce any nominations?
Mayor, as per the advisement of Mr. Costigan from the Farmers Advisory Committee, I'd like to appoint either a male or Amo and Sharon Hubert.
Okay, we have a motion. We need a second.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any comments or remarks on the nominations? Okay, hearing none. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Mrs. Showmaker?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mayor DeBella?
Yes. On 9C2, we have an appointment for 2 alternate members to the Preservation Task Force. One term expires 12/31/07, and the second expires 12/31/08. Member of the council would like to make any
Mayor,
nominations?
on the advice of Mr. Costigan, I'd like to recommend that we appoint Sal Massaro to the term which expires on 12/31/08.
Okay, we have a motion. We need a second, please.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any comments or remarks? Okay, hearing none, roll call, please, on Mr. Massaro.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Mrs. Showmaker?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mayor DeBella?
Yes. And would someone like to make a motion for the other unexpired?
You know, Mayor, I'd like to make a motion. I believe we received a resume in from a Fran Malsbury. I'd like to make a motion that we appoint her to the term that expires on 12/31/07.
Okay, we have a motion. We need a second.
Second.
Okay, any comments or remarks? Okay, hearing none, roll call, please.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes.
Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Mrs. Showmaker?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mayor DeBella?
Respectfully, no. 9C3, we need to accept the resignation, Shade Tree Commissioner, and appoint a member for the vacancy. This is a term that expires 2010.
Mayor, if I may, I'd like to accept the resignation of Mr. Zick Panic, who has done a fine job, and as under his suggestion as serving as a past Shade Tree Commission member, we always do have an alternate, and would like to fill that void with name by Jean Lynch, who is currently serving as an alternate on the Shade Tree.
All right, we have a motion we have a motion to simultaneously accept the resignation from Zigpanic and appoint, say it again?
Jean Lynch.
Jean Lynch, and you want to promote her from alternate to fill this vacancy.
And by the way, she is a certified master gardener.
Okay. We have a motion. We need a second, please.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any remarks or comments?
Are there other alternates, or is that the only one? I'm just asking.
It's the only one that they brought to my attention.
Anybody know if there's other alternates? Any help out there?
I think there is more
Kirk
than one.
Vislaki is the second alternate.
He doesn't.
in front of you.
It's in the,
We'll grab it out though for you.
Yeah, grab it out for
he's the other alternate?
is correct.
And
Okay.
actually, on here, I don't see.
No problem. I just wanted to know that answer. That's all. I'm okay.
All right, we've had a motion and a second. Are there any additional comments or remarks?
No.
All right, hearing none. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes?
Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Mrs. Showmaker?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mayor DeBella?
Yes, and I believe that that creates a vacancy in the alternate slot. So do we need to advertise for an alternate position now?
Not tonight.
No, Mr. Visconti doesn't automatically move up from 2 to 1, does he?
No.
They'll do that,
The
though.
same
Isn't
term.
that how we've been doing?
Yeah. I mean, you could certainly,
Hold on.
yeah, okay. So we need to re-advertise for another vacancy, is what it sounds like, Ms. Woolman.
Okay.
Okay? And 9C4, we need to accept the resignation from the Economic Development Committee of Robert Theus, who's also the chair, and appoint a chair. And as an aside, I'm very disappointed Mr. Theus can't continue to serve. He's a fine local businessman, and other business commitments apparently are taking him away from it. So it's a loss that he can't continue to serve. So would a member of the council like to introduce a nomination?
It was suggested to me to reach out, which I tried to today, wasn't able to get a hold of the former president of the Chamber of Commerce, Karen Leshak. That she may very well be interested.
She lives in, actually, I'm sorry, I take that back. I was going to say something else. Yeah, she'd be terrific.
And so I reached out to her today, but I didn't get an opportunity to speak with her.
So you want to hold?
So I would like to hold and see, very efficient, a very driven woman, and I think she'd be a good fit in that spot, and I'd like to have the opportunity to at least speak to her.
All right, so why don't we just maybe accept the resignation of Mr. Theus? and
Mayor,
then
the
we
only
can-
question I would have is, then, right now, we have a committee with no chair. We need to appoint a chair from the list of active members, I would believe, and in that case, I would like to recommend that we appoint Richard Alter as the chair. He is the senior member on that committee right now.
I'll second that.
All right, so we have a motion and a second to accept the resignation and name a new chair, Mr. Robert Alter.
Richard Alter.
Richard Alter.
Is that a new chair or an interim chair?
No, that'd be new, it'd be permanent.
Okay, we have a motion, we need a second.
I second it.
I'm sorry, I apologize. We have a motion and a second under remarks.
Yeah, oh,
Well, I don't think appointing a new member and making him the chair is correct.
prudent.
I think you need to have somebody that's been involved in the process for a couple of years. You know, I would love to see Ms. Leschak take a slot on the EDC and then see how it works, and then, you know, at some point in time, if she wishes, you know, and the chairmanship becomes available, certainly consider it.
Okay. Any additional comments, remarks? Okay, hearing none, roll call, please.
Mrs. Dalton?
Yes?
Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Mrs. Showmaker?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
no.
Mayor DeBella?
Yes. All right, we have some discussion items. 10-1, which really is a carryover, and I appreciate the council's consideration on this. Just very briefly, I wrote to Senator Singer, unhappy about the fact that the co-mediation process has to take place behind closed doors. He sponsored a bill which would require COA to have public hearings on any of the matters that are discussed in mediation before they become finalized. And I think we all just wanted to make certain that we were comfortable with the wording of Senator Singer's bill. And if everyone agreed, we wanted to send a supportive statement up to the President of the Senate asking that the bill be posted and supporting Senator Singer's potential bill for consideration. And I'm not certain if everyone's had a chance to take a look at it or if anyone wants to add any comments to it.
I thought we had discussion on it, Mayor. Maybe we
did.
didn't
I
complete
think
it,
everyone
but
just
yeah.
wanted to take a chance to read it and make sure there was no disagreement what was in his bill.
I think the bill is, I think it's benefit to the public to express their concerns at that time, which right now they're closed out.
Yeah, I mean, it's supposed to be an open process, and
You and I live with it.
and we know from firsthand experience, it's a closed door. I thought the government was supposed to work for the people, not keep everything from the people. And, Senator Singer's bill, which I read, you know what, opens the doors where it should be. So.
All right, so it sounds like we have consensus that we'd like Mr. Czerniecki for your office or the clerk's office, whatever is appropriate, send a letter to Richard Cody, President of the Senate, asking that the bill be posted and that we put our support and endorsement behind Senator Singer's bill as stands. Okay? And then 10.2, you have here finance policy on billing. We're going to discuss a finance policy that would assign each case a billing number so as to easily assess how money was spent on any given case. And I believe Mrs. Dalton and Mrs. Showmaker have both spoken on this particular topic.
Yes, Mayor, I was asked to look into if we could determine how much the township spent on a specific case. And the way the process works is there is no digital record for a specific case that we can go into our computer system at this point. Our professionals submit bills and they itemize in the bill, you know, what they worked on, how many hours they put in, and then finance will cut a bill for the total once their bill has been reviewed. But we don't issue specific checks for what's on the bill. So I think this was the one matter with respect to the zoning, the ARE2 and the ARE6, and there was a question of, you know, what did we spend on that? So in just kind of like sampling, just trying to do a sample, it would take, I would say, months, given the length of that litigation and the number of attorneys that were involved, including planning board and town council, to come up with some sort of reasonable guess as to what we spent on litigation for that specific case. But I would note that a number of communities have policies where if litigation is going to exceed some nominal amount, that an award, a contract is awarded to handle that specific litigation, and what those communities do is issue a purchase order upon which that litigation can be billed to and the contract attached to it. So we could certainly always track how much we spent on a specific purchase order. And so my recommendation is that the Finance Review Committee is going to be considering a group of policies, kind of finance policies that aren't addressed by state law, that they may look at incorporating a policy like that for council to consider.
Mayor, if I can comment first. My biggest concern always is that, and I think I mentioned this to Ms. Dalton tonight, is that on certain issues, sometimes it's more prudent for us to cut our losses than to litigate. I want to think of it as an insurance policy. When you wreck your car, if the car is worth $2,000 and the damage is $5,000, you know, the insurance company gives you a situation where you have to make a choice. Same thing here. I want us to be able to make sensible choices based on what we're spending, and I think it's a little bit difficult for us because it's not something that we see. But if I had to ask, I would never want to have to ask Mr. Filiaccio or his staff to indulge them to do any kind of hours of work to give me an answer on something to say, was it prudent for us to cut our losses at this point, or do we continue to trudge forward? Do the council understand where my concerns are?
Absolutely. Mr. Dalton, you want to comment?
But I think the answer and what the town manager is saying is at least we would be at a point, you know, months or years from now where if we implemented this kind of policy, we would have historical data to look at and make a decision upon what did it cost us the last time we had this kind of case. Along the lines of billing policies, I would also like, and I guess maybe this would be something for the Finance Review Committee to look at and then report back. I have a significant concern, and it's not intended at any specific professional, that we are not getting invoices in a timely enough manner to be able to look at and address a problem when it is occurring. My concern is that we are getting bills from professionals in April or March for January. And I don't, Ms. Showmaker said earlier she would be embarrassed to send a bill to a client 11 years later. I know 2 months is not a lot of time, but I think that anything more than 2 weeks, given that the client is a municipal government that has to answer to the people, is unacceptable to me. And I would like to see us have some kind of policy where all of our professionals, regardless of who they are, submit their bills within 2 weeks of the end of the month.
Mr. Field, it looks like you made a comment.
I do have one comment, because we have a 30-day rule in effect now. However, I think what council sees at this time of year, we do not process any bills until the contracts are back from the professionals. So you may see bills that we have seen in January that have been held and have not been processed until all the paperwork done and the signed contracts are back.
I think the 30-day rule may apply to escrow billing. I believe it's a 60-day policy regarding non-escrow.
Is that a statutory policy, Mr.
No, I
President?
think it's a township policy.
Town has had a policy years back when we had some billing problems where any bill older than 60 days, I'm to bring to attention of council before it's to be processed for payment. And just to let council look at it and review it. And of course, I don't do that. If I'm or purchasing is holding it for paperwork, we don't bring it to council. But certainly if we do notice during the year that somebody is billing 60 days late, we'll bring it to council.
So you're saying now the policy is 30. If for some reason someone went over to 60, you'd have to come back to us.
Right. Policy was 30. The municipal land use law requires 30 on escrow. Our policy was we would like all the professionals, I think in the letter that we send out each year, we want all the professionals to bill in 30.
Okay.
If it's more than 60, it's to come to the council's attention.
Okay, Mr. Walsh, you had a comment?
Yeah, so when I see bills from CME, who's our planning board engineer, on paperwork that you give us to go back to October, November, December of last year, in March of this year, you tell me that that's bills that were submitted to escrow and it doesn't make a difference?
If they're escrow, they're more than 30 days old, more than likely we were waiting for additional money that the escrow was insufficient to pay them. And those bills are held up until the developer deposits additional escrow money.
Okay. I'll tell you now, I don't like the answer, okay? Just for the simple fact, if I want to get paid money in my industry, and somebody wants a bill done a certain way, I gotta submit the bill that way to get paid. If they want to get paid from me, submit the bill the way I need it submitted, and I paid them. I don't like here, well, it can't be, that's not the way it's done. It just doesn't. So I know I've asked questions in the past about billing. I don't like the answers. I want to know how much is in escrow, how much professional fees is charged to escrow, how much of it is coming from the taxpayer, how much is coming from escrow. I mean, there's a big discrepancy there, and I want to know what it is. I want to be able to ask Mr. Filiaccio tonight, sir, is there any way you can tell me how much the planning board engineer got paid from the citizens of Howell Township in the months of November and December? We're in April of 2007. Can I have that answer tomorrow?
No, sir, but you can have that answer timely. I do think that tomorrow might be a little rapid. There's a lot of purchase orders to go through to look at, but certainly we can separate it between township and, you do get a bill list report that does list by every 15 days
Yes,
by
I'm not
category.
blaming you, Mr. Filiaccio. I'm just saying the system. Could the system be done where you can just hit a button in the computer? I asked my bookkeeper today, who graduated high school, okay, and was trained by our accountants to do some work for us. I want to know what was spent in insurances in the last 6 years. All different kinds of insurances with my company. 2 minutes later, there was a 5-page report with about 150 journal entries showing me all the money that went to insurances in the last 5 years. We can't do that here.
We
I
can't.
think we can.
We can't. The difference is if you ask, in the case of the attorneys or the professionals, if you ask us to give you a separate breakdown for every item that they billed for, that's not how we pay the checks. That's not what's written, what's written in what the purpose is legal fees for the month. But for insurance, for example, we know that we've paid PMA or whatever. We know who the companies were.
I see that. I just use that as an example. I see that when I look through the registers that Mr. Filiaccio.
Certainly,
gives us.
I can run a printout tomorrow that shows, for example, CMA, since you brought that up. I don't know if you would understand it, because you do need to be familiar with account numbers and everything else. So certainly I can, whether or not, I haven't done one for a long period of time to know whether or not it's going to come out in a format that you as a non-financial person and not familiar with our computer system would understand it or not.
Call me a lot of things, Mr. Filiaccio, but not a non-financial person, please.
Not I said, for my computer system, for this computer system.
It's just very difficult for me to accept that I can't say how much money was paid to CME in 2006, and I cannot be told how much of it came from the taxpayers and how much of it came from escrows.
You certainly can have that. Can have that. You certainly can know that. I have never been asked for that information until tonight.
I truthfully, in the bottom of my soul, want to know how much money is coming from the residents to the professionals in this town, because it's one of the things that I think needs to be addressed to lower some of the tax burden to the people in this town.
We can, if council makes a motion, we can get you that report.
Can I make a comment on your comment? One of the ways that we could do that is, once again, we can put a cap, which we had in the past, on all professional fees, not to exceed a certain amount of money. I mean, we've done that, but, you have to understand.
There's a cap on all professional services contracts that I drafted this year for.
You could tighten it back. It's up to you.
That does not apply to escrow, but it does apply to.
And one of the things, just to clarify, that you were talking about from a planning board perspective, what does the taxpayers pay towards planning board professionals? Those come out of escrow fees. That does not come out of.
Most of them.
Most of them come out of escrow.
Not
fees.
all.
Not all.
Yeah, I've asked these questions, and this is.
For example, litigation doesn't, and if you take a look at the planning board's expenses, they have an awful lot of litigation, and that has to be billed to the taxpayer.
I really believe that in order to address numbers, you need to know what they are and how to get at them. That's where I need to begin. That's where I begin in my business. I think that's where most business people begin. Where's all the money going? Where's it coming from? And that's how you address how to use it more efficiently. I'm on the.
I think we should expound. I like where this is going.
Yeah, I'm on the Finance Review Committee, and.
But I think that we should. This is a good thing for our budget, that we need to. But I think I think that you're on a good path here. I think you need to make some points and maybe get it to Mr. Filiaccio on some of the things that you want answers to, and then we can all be copied. And it's going to give us a good start on where you want to go.
You can't.
Sound fair?
All's fair.
You can't improve what you can't measure.
Right.
What?
You
can't
can-
improve.
You can't improve what you can't measure.
And point well taken.
So if we go back to the original recommendation, I think we all agree that we would like to adopt a policy that implements a system that allows us to track back bills more easily on a case basis. So what kind of direction are you looking for on this, Mr. Czerniecki?
None, I was just following up. There was a
Okay.
request to say, I believe one of the council members asked, can we find out what we spent on this one particular case? And my answer is please don't make me do that.
Right. All right, so now the next question that we have to ask you, of course, is how long will it take you to operationalize this? And are there any additional expenses that we may need to incur to put a systematic process like this in place?
No, I think this is just a matter of our own policies. When we decide to take on litigation, that we have a policy to say perhaps we do it in increments of so many thousands of dollars. And this way we could always go back to the governing body and say we've reached that threshold. Let's do a review. Do we want to continue with this?
Okay.
I just caution on one certain thing. Not to use war as a metaphor there, but a lot of people have been talking about you don't let the opposition know that when you plan to withdraw, that kind of thing, or when you plan to retreat. In the same way, litigation is a type of warfare that you wouldn't want to let the opposition know how much you're willing to spend necessarily. So I would be cautious about that when it comes to litigation.
It's a fair point. Okay. Thank you. All right. So I think you have your direction on that, Mr. Czerniecki. All right, we're just going to take a very brief 3-minute recess, and we'll come back and get into public comments. All right, I'm going to call the meeting back to order. If I can have your attention, please. We're going to go to a hearing of the citizens. Just as a friendly reminder, Mr. Czerniecki, when he returns, and in his absence, Mrs. Schlegel, will just kind of give us a heads up when speakers at 3 minutes, and we'd ask if you could, at that point, wrap it up so we can stay within the 5-minute time measure that we have set. Have we been doing it at 4 or at 3?
Well, we figured you owed
I
us
think
two.
we've been doing at 2.
4-minute warning.
Okay, at 4 minutes.
2.
You already used 2 of your next minutes.
At
last
4
time.
minutes, we'll give you a flag to wrap it up. Okay.
Here we go.
I need to deviate off the list. Mr. Sean Golden is going to go first. He has an engagement. He asked if he'd go first. Mr. Golden, welcome. Come on up, sir.
What is the Ivy League closing at 11?
What time does that close?
Oh, good evening, Mr. Golden.
Good evening, Council, Mr. Mayor, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, and we will keep it brief. Really, my order of business here tonight is to, on behalf of, first state my name, Sean Golden, 14 Johnny Drive, here on behalf of North Howell Little League. And the North Howell Little League would like to extend their invitation to the council. Our opening day is April 21st, with the ceremonies that kick off at 11 a.m. If you could show up beforehand, that would be fantastic. Also, along the line, what Mr. Walsh was saying before about the kids with autism, we do have the Challenger game and the Challenger League kicking off that day right after the opening ceremony, so we do look forward to that. Just to give you a brief update, I know Mr. Walsh has been over the complex. The field lighting has been put up by Musco and Lucas Electric. The building is coming along, right, Helene? Mr. Czerniecki is coming along. We did the block walls, the bathroom fixtures are in, and the painting has been done. So there are some other issues that just have to be addressed. I think maybe you can shed a little bit more light on the schedule, but as far as the update with the volunteers, Mr. Walsh was down there, we were cleaning up the area, and the facility is really starting to take shape. So.
I was there today. Lucas was there, pulling wire, township employees were there.
Yeah, it's coming along. I think the only thing the major sticking points were the electric and the doors, and hopefully, I don't know what the schedule is for the doors, but I know George is working feverishly on getting the doors installed.
Thank you for the update, we appreciate it.
Okay? So we look forward to seeing you there, and thank you very much.
Thank you for coming out
Thank you
again,
for
Mr.
the
Grogan. We appreciate the update, keeping us informed. Okay, Mr. Magid, you're up, sir.
Hold on, I think Abe owes us 2.
I tell you about the cat with 9 lives, I got 7 of them.
What, 7 of those cats?
Don't get kittenish on me now. All right. Abe Magid, 89 Mariners Cove.
Good evening, Mr. Magid.
Evening.
How can we help you tonight, Mr. Magid?
All over the place. Celebrate them all. I had all my wife's Christian, I'm Jewish.
No, I said,
all
how
my
could we-
Christian friends were down for Passover, and I went up for Easter on Franklin Lakes to our church. Fabulous, great work. Okay, I know that. All right. I want to talk again about the fallen trees in the Mariners-Squam River. It's very interesting what took place. A letter was sent, an application was sent out by our township engineer, William Nunziato, to the DEP, March 23rd. Truth sweet, DEP replied saying they received the letter March 26th. Makes sense. 23rd was a Friday. They got it on Monday. They sent the letter on the 29th. And they stipulate that the application was, as they put it, deficient in the sense of what they want. And they want this, that, and this, that. I won't go through it. I spoke with Mr. Nunziato, and he's going to do his very best to fill them in and maybe even have them ease off a little bit on some of the more stringent things if they would be agreeable, et cetera, et cetera. Very good, very good. However, what's my point here? Why am I up here? Well, I'm up here because last week on Wednesday, it rained a lot. One day, it broke right up to the top, started the overflow. Didn't rain the second day. Well, that was Wednesday. Thursday, bright sunny day. Great. Okay? We're living in a sort of Damocles here, aren't we? Suppose it had rain heavy on Thursday and Friday. Boom! We'd all be flooded. No, some of us would be flooded. Why am I making this point? The point I'm making is, since November, I said, let's get on the stick. Let's apply. We don't have to maybe jump in right away. And Mr. Howell made a point. It gets cold in the winter. They can't go in anywhere. Well, we happen to have a warm January. But who can tell by nature? That's not the point. Point is, the different members here, or whoever was involved, was very negligent because this piece of paper, which they sent out on March 29th, if we had applied, say, in January, and they said, no, do this, do that. First of all, we might have to be on our hands and knees asking for a little, please excuse me for the more stringent things, and maybe it'll be okay. We'd have time as we come into spring. We don't have any time now. It could start pouring tomorrow for 3 days, and we'll all be flooded. I don't understand. I'm not talking to the mayor, to the council, to whoever is involved, why people didn't get on the stick. And by the way, it's not a big project because for the whole Manisquan River, the whole 5 miles, the cost approximation is $27,000. $600 for the fee, $27,500 or whatever it is. It's a minuscule thing. I heard a lot of talk here how major it was. Okay, well, everybody's been lucky so far. We haven't had the 3-4 days of heavy rain with all those trees in there. And I don't know how long it's going to take for the DEP to say, okay, go ahead. They make reference to, they want to hear from you within 60 days. If you don't, apply all over again. We're in April now. Could pour. This kind of activity should have taken place at least 2 months ago. At least at the end of January. Certainly beginning of February. And right here we're in April. And
Mr.
now,
Mayor, that's 4 minutes.
okay, I'll wind it up. I'm glad to. 20 seconds. There was great negligence here going on. And I heard all kinds of reasons, month after month. This paper from the DEP should have been in our hands last January. And then we proceed as soon as it gets warm. Thank you very much. You didn't do it right. At all.
Okay. Mr. Lariah, welcome, sir.
Not now.
Oh.
We have rules.
Good evening, Mr. Lariah. Nice to see you. Welcome.
Vince Lariah, 56C, The Villages. Kind of come to my attention just recently, so I haven't had a chance to review this with the manager, but it appears as though the villages are being billed for the lighting in our community. Now, street light, and specifically street lighting. By my reckoning, we're overpaying about $200 a month, $2,400 a year, and it looks like it's been going on for many years. I'd like to start something so that we can, well, let me go back further. If the township is paying for it, somebody's getting a double hit on lighting our streets. And that, in this case, it's the utility company. Is it true that we're paying for street lighting? I mean, the utility told us that that's the fact. But how, are you also paying for it? And I want to go from there.
All right, can we open up, Mr. Chernetsky? I mean, I'm certain you don't have an answer on the spot. Can we have the appropriate party look into this?
Yes. I don't have an answer on the spot, thank you.
And we have Mr. Lariah's contact information. We can get back to him?
Yes.
Is there any specific data that you need?
In your bill, you should have numbers associated with the poles that you're being billed for.
I've got that.
And if you can give me that, that'll answer a lot of questions.
Okay. I'll be coming by before the end of the week, Mr. Ingiano, I'll stop in.
Thank you.
With this
Okay.
file.
Thank you, Mr.
And just
Lariah.
one other, if I may, one other.
Sure.
And it's the question of buffer, things going on in the buffer zones. It's unconscionable that a person can't get out of their house. But how the heck did we get there in the first place? How was the building put up and that was so close to this zone, to this buffer zone? What are we doing that letting this go on? And that's all I have.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lariah. We appreciate your comments. Mr. Meyer, good evening. Welcome. Thanks for your patience.
Stephen Meyer, Delphia Road. I'm here acting as Vice Chair for Board of Adjustment in regards to the PAL site. I don't know how familiar you are with the application we have before us. We're presently trying to get cell tower off private property and onto a piece of township property. Part of what they're running into right now is they need, Mr. Scanlon asked me to speak to you to get two things for him. One was a copy of the deed. Apparently Verizon's rather fussy that we actually own it before we rent it. And the other is if the council could give whatever authorizations are necessary to Bertzel Corporation, Bertzel Engineering, to open up the files for the remediation for the fuel tank that was removed. That is becoming an issue with Verizon. They're not interested in any site with contamination where they could get sued, so we're trying to get all that cleared away.
Sure. Mr. Bongiovanni, since we talked about this tonight in closed, are you comfortable with us, or do you want to maybe have a conversation offline with Mr. Meyer?
Well, it is a ongoing hearing, the zoning board. It might be better to discuss it offline.
All right. What I can tell you, Mr. Meyer, is the council is aware of some of the things. Our manager has brought us up to speed. Perhaps you and Mr. Bongiovanni could just take a quick moment offline, and he can fill you in with where we are from the particulars, if you will.
Basically, what he had asked me to do was to make the request so council
course.
could formally authorize whatever they have to so that this can move forward.
Absolutely.
Because we do have a time constraint of about 2 months on this before they come back in. And at that point, we're either going to have to present them with an alternate site, or we're going to have to make a decision on the residential site. And it's a dangerous precedent for us to start.
No question.
They're a great thing to have on your property. They're a terrible thing for your neighbor.
That's very true. Thank you, Mr.
very
Meyer.
much.
Maybe you and Mr. Bongiovanni could just catch up briefly before you have to go, if you wouldn't mind. Thanks for coming out. Mrs. Dixell, welcome. Come on up, Mrs. Dixell.
Hi,
Mrs.
Barbara
Dixell.
Dixell, Howell Township Villages. Couple of things regarding signs in the adult stores. You do have a new facade ordinance, right? In town? Okay. Well, why can't you kind of go to these stores and kind of coerce them or make them agree or make them go by the new facade ordinance and take down some of the stuff that's on them now, you know, advertising, whatever they do, and take some of the explicit whatever that hangs in their windows or talks about what they do, take it out, because if it's near a family store like a beauty parlor or anything else, it shouldn't be there. So maybe that is something that you guys can think of giving direction to. If it's standing by itself in the middle of nowhere, I guess you don't have much to do about it, but if it's in a row of stores where there's family businesses, not good, too good for the youngsters and people to see. Okay, the builders, easement problems and builders. When these builders come to the boards, and aren't they given direction on what to do to notify all of the people that are going to buy homes, that they have to actually notify them and tell them if they got a deed restriction or an easement or something like that or whatever on their property? Aren't they obligated to tell these people what they can do and what they can't do? All right, so if the people come there and they know that they bought a house with some kind of a restriction, well, you know you bought the house, you know you spent the money, so don't bellyache and just live by it. You can't put a pool in if they told you can't put a pool and no one told you to buy the house. Go someplace else and buy the house. Okay, Mr. Walsh is a non-financial person, man. I think that's hilarious. Mr. Walsh is a very financial human being. That's his business, is finance. They can't say the man is not a financial person. That's mind-boggling to me. That's his business. And yeah, I've heard you ask 100 million times, Mr. Walsh, for things and things and things, and you don't get them. It's time you got it. It's time you got everything you asked for, and every person up here. It's time. You got everything. The professionals, everyone work for the people of this town. You were all elected by the people of this town. If you need information, you should have it. In order to conduct the business of the town and of the people, you should have it. Buffers, okay, buffers, when, I guess we're talking about U.S. Homes, when they got their approvals and when they got them way back when, they were allowed to put rear yard setbacks, infringing and buffers. Now they've got buffer problems, and now they've got flooding problems. And they're filling in their flooding problems. They've taken out the entire buffer. It's not there. I went out and photographed it. It's not there. They took it out. They're filling in their flooding problems. Hopefully, the villages won't have any flooding problems after they so-called, quote, fix it. I hope we don't have any, because I know their homeowners are complaining, but you know what? I really will complain a lot, too, if we wind up getting residual flooding from what they fixed. So, other than that, I hope you all had a great holiday. I don't have too much to say, but, okay. All right, that's about it. I have nothing more to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Dixell. Just need to ask the council, I think Mrs. Smith is the last public speaker. Since we've gone past 11, we just need a motion to extend the meeting for another 15 minutes.
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion, we need a second. Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Good evening, Mrs. Smith.
Good evening. Pauline Smith, Vanderveer Road. As usual, I planned to come and discuss something with the council, and more pressing things came up, so that's going to be put off again. I want to compliment the staff first, and then I have two issues, and then I'll leave it at that. Unfortunately, a deer was hit on the road right in front of my house on Holy Thursday. I was expecting quite a bit of company over the weekend, and I didn't like looking at the poor thing myself. So I called the police because it was in the road. They came and they moved it. And I thought, well, tomorrow's Good Friday. There's not going to be anybody in the township, whatever. So I called, mostly to ask for advice. And most people I would have asked either weren't at their desks or were out for the day. So I talked to Myra, who called downstairs to Public Service Department, and Judy, and they put in a request that it be, because of the holiday weekend, be immediately tended to, and the poor thing was removed the next morning. Thank you. But, good job done there. Please don't screw around with our buffers. We fight so long and hard, and I think everyone should understand what they're about and what you're taking away. And I'm sorry for a homeowner whose steps go down into a buffer, but buyer beware, that's his problem with the seller, not the township. And don't forget, the people are the township, and those easements, whatever they are, belong to the people. So if you do consider giving something away, it should be a public hearing with the public allowed to speak, and the people who are on the other side of the buffer might have a reason that that shouldn't happen. And you should listen to both sides, and you who are the trustees of the township need to make the decision. Please don't pass it off to a committee. No matter how proficient they are, and how good they are not the trustees of the property of the township. Please take that into consideration. Now, we have an ordinance that says that all major subdivisions have perimeter buffers. And yes, 2 backed up make it nice 100-foot buffer. What are their purposes? Their purposes are a lot. Just plain greenways, and not just for animals, for people too. People need a certain amount of space, and in the higher density developments especially, it's not between the houses. They move in and they put up fences. We always joke about that. Just look at some of the developments. People need the air, the animals need to go, we need to allow things to grow. Leave the buffers alone. The buffers were put there for a reason. They fight long and hard. How did they happen? Maybe it would be helpful for you to understand how the problems happen. A few of the developments are because of the things that we discussed earlier, and that's the COA stipulations. The developer comes in with these rights. It says so written out in the stipulation before the planning board makes any decision and doesn't have any say-so in the matter. That's one way, and I can name a few developments that occurred in, that I'm aware of. The other way is when a developer gets his approval, he doesn't necessarily say how big that house is going to be. He goes in and it's a permitting process. There's and I don't mean to be insulting. It's just necessary in bureaucracy and the large running of the township. There's a lack of communication. What I automatically thought years and years ago would happen, because it's the responsibility of the people in the township, and I found out when I volunteered,
Mayor, that's 4 minutes.
And then was on council, the one group doesn't talk to the other group, and things consequently fall through the cracks, things that people don't even dream of. And this is one of the ways that it happens. If you followed it from the approval stage at planning and zoning, because sometimes zoning boards do approve site plans, to the actual permitting stage, and find out how much larger and where that house is,
isn't necessarily where the planning board or zoning board thought it was going to be. And then, yes, legally, we are all required to be notified to certain things, but a lot of people don't understand it, and I'm sure they are. But again, buyer beware, it ends up being their fault. Why should the people of the township pay? And they are paying if you give the land away. And I'm going to give you an example. And I know I'm over time, but I think this is important.
Yes,
just turned 5 minutes.
All right.
For you to understand.
Just make it as brief as you can, Mrs. Smith.
When I complained about my revaluation to the tax assessor, and I said, well, half of our land isn't buildable, why are we taxed for it being buildable? And he said, but it's a buffer from your neighbors, isn't it? So even though the situation isn't exactly the same, it is. Is the township going to give me land if I want to build a pool because even though I have land, it's not buildable and I can't put a pool on it, it's too wet? You can't do that for everybody. You can't make up for something that happened between a seller and a buyer. I feel sorry for those people, but it's not our responsibility. Now, I do have another issue, and I'd ask you to bear with me and make an exception. Just because an accident happened at our house, by our house tavern, and if you might remember a gentleman who got up and talked about the accidents and something to be done in the area, and I got up later one more time when I was going to talk about what I was originally going to talk about tonight. I'll pass these around so you can see, and I think it's a good example that shows, I didn't take a picture of the other young lady here today, did
Mayor, quickly, you can extend the,
over.
Pauline, excuse me, Mayor, you can extend the time by 3 minutes by
Is the pleasure of the
motion.
council to give Mrs. Smith another 3 minutes and let her wrap up on this?
Well, I'd like you to look at the pictures, and I thought it would be helpful just because she had those pictures to explain.
No.
What I was, you know, I know you love my chops, and I like you, and you're teasing, but the people out there have called and said you're very disrespectful to me, and you don't want them to think you're disrespectful to me.
I'm never disrespectful to you, ma'am.
Thank you. The pictures show that the curves are sharp, and the township, that's a township easement that came with a cluster provision. And if we could get the county to move the road, and if we donated that piece of land, it would save lives in the future. Do you understand from the pictures what I'm getting at?
Is that where the truck overturned yesterday?
Yes. And I've seen it many times before, but it shows that there's just, it's too sharp coming around that curve.
Mr. Showmaker, go
If
right
I can
ahead.
comment, because both Bob and I live in that area, there are numerous concerns there. It's not just the curve, it's the way the road tilts.
Yes, definitely.
It's not only the way the road tilts, it's the way it curves, it's the speed that people are not aware of how that road bends. And I will tell you that the way they put the new road in, I mean, there are a lot of variables. Bill and I talked about this over and over. I mean, it wasn't intended to, it was going to be redesigned. It wasn't intended to be redesigned as it is, but that's how it has occurred. So I don't know what it is that we can do.
I don't disagree with you. That all fits into what I'm saying. A whole new piece of road that would soften the curve. You'd come around and go alongside in that open space and then back up to where 524 for so many, few hundred feet, I think.
I think, Mrs. Smith, we appreciate your additional comments. We've got these photographs. Can we keep these, or do you need these back?
They belong to this young lady. You'd have
Okay.
to ask her.
Right.
But I just thought
We'll get
since
them
she
back to you.
had them,
Great.
it was a...
Thank you for your comments. We'll get them back to you before
Thank
the
you.
meeting's over. Thank you, Mrs. Smith. All right, we're going to close the public portion. I believe we've dispensed with all of the business. Just want to remind the council our next regular meeting is Tuesday, April 24th. Executive session at 6:30. Regular session somewhere between 7:30 and 8. We have a budget meeting 7 p.m. on Wednesday, the 25th. Mr. Janeski, is there any other business for the council this evening?
No, sir.
I entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Safe trip, everyone.